This is Peter Han here. We're just jumping on live on YouTube. It's been a minute, but I did want to start the year off and being able to reestablish, some feeds again. I've been off in a break for about a good solid 2 months or so. Uh, coming off holidays and all the travels. I've been to Asia. I was out there in Taiwan and Japan for about a month total, actual traveling, and got back earlier part of mid part of January, really, if anything else. But going into this month of February, our classes had just begun, so I'm kind of settling back into the working scheduling. So I wanted to get back also on the YouTube channel and to share with you guys some more sort of experiences, time, and be able to sketch with you guys here live. So what we have today to kind of start our first live stream for 2026 is to start with something a little bit older and then go from there into maybe some sketching for today. I do have a class today as well too, some work, but thankfully that's going to be more in the evenings. So I have a little bit of time to hang out and also use a new space that we have in the garage at the moment. So trying to utilize as much of this, working space that we're trying to develop and test it out and see how it feels and lighting situation, internet connection, all that sort of stuff. So again, welcome for those of you joining for the first time. If you're coming back, as you probably will know and understand how a lot of these kind of things work when live streams, you are welcome to obviously, communicate with me and ask questions and whatnot. I may not be able to get to all of your questions. So if I miss them, because right now on YouTube, I'm streaming off my phone at the moment. So because of that, the chat tends to go through pretty quickly, but also on YouTube, the chat, slowly fades away off the screen. So sometimes I'll read it, sometimes I'll miss it. But like I said, you're welcome to ask again. I'll try to get into the question if possible. If the question is not in anything in relation to things that we're talking about or what we're doing, I may just skip it over and do something else. So we'll start with this first. And I do have some things to draw with today. I just brought some paper out and I have my PeterHanStyle pens, just something I just kind of grabbed off the side of my studio. And I'll probably just draw a little bit today as well. So what we have right now at the moment are very old pieces of art and sketchbooks. This stuff I rediscovered, actually, if anything, I would call it that, in the garage here right now, and just kind of cleaning stuff out. And there are boxes and stuff like this, and piled up, of course, is old archives of stuff that I've had for decades on end at this point. And I obviously remember these and have gone through them in the past before too, probably a number of years ago, but never really shared them. I don't think. I don't remember ever just putting this on YouTube or anything sort of like social media wise. But this particular book is a very old one, and this particular sketchbook, I don't know the brand of it anymore, honestly. If I looked at the back of it, I mean, there's a bunch of like stickers and stuff. Again, this is stuff that I pasted on when I was a teenager. So this particular book I had gotten when I was in high school. So this must have been probably around 1998 when I was maybe a junior and possibly a senior in high school. So it was around 98, 99 when I began using this particular sketchbook. This one's an interesting one. The reason why I liked it as a kid so much is because it's refillable. So you can actually slide the spine off, and it actually broke down here. This was a locking mechanism, but it broke. And you can actually pull off the cover and replace new paper. So if I filled up the sketchbook, you can buy replacement packs of paper and just fill it up. Oh, here we go. There's a brand name right there. It might still be around. Comtrak, Komtrak. I don't know the brand name actually. So Comtrak is what it's called. I have yet to see this kind of spiral bound refillable sketchbook in any art store since. So again, this is the late 90s when I first started using the book. So as a teenager, I wouldn't like find stickers that I liked and I would just like paste them on there. You can see I was a fan of Dragon Ball back in the 90s, and I still like Dragon Ball quite a bit. Back then, in the 90s when I was introduced to this subject, this property in comics and mangas, used to read them in the Korean language versions and watch the old animation movies on VHS tapes and whatnot. So I was a big fan, and of course of like Hong Kong action movies and Jackie Chan to Bruce Lee and old comics. And I did have a Sega Saturn, so that sticker came from my Sega Saturn that I owned. So this is very much a 90s sketchbook for sure, in terms of especially how the stickers feel. I don't know where some of this stuff comes from. This one in particular, I think that's a Jeff Darrow piece of art. I don't know what it's for, but anyways. So this particular book, like I said, was one that I started using in the 90s, but the work you're going to see in this, as I looked at some of the years and dates that I put down, is actually more around the 2000s. So this is probably the year 2000 is when I started using this book. I will adjust the camera a little bit if I need to. Just kind of give me a little bit of feedback. If you feel like you want me to go a little bit closer, I can do so. Because I am on a little bit of a malleable, like a modular system, so I can move it around pretty easily. So just kind of inform me if you guys want to see more of it up close. But in any case, so these sketches you're seeing right now are not the sketches that I started with this book at the time back when I was a teenager. Again, this is 2000. Okay, yeah, let me adjust that real fast. I'm gonna just bring it in. Sorry, a little bit of a jump. There we go. Let me just tighten it up. All right. So as I said, this is work that I left this stuff in from the last time I had used this sketchbook. So from the very last page, and this book is actually relatively filled up. Okay, and as I've used it as a student, as a teenager, I replaced the pages. I've taken some out, and so there I'm sure older drawings that are probably gone or lost or thrown away that were originally part of the sketchbook. But these were some of the replacement pages, and so from the first page and beyond, this is definitely going to be the year 2000. So this is, more than 25 years ago. And so I'm 43 right now. So I would have been around 19 years old, I would say, when I was doing this stuff. Okay. And I'm sure they're going to be very common sort of questions I've received in the past when I would show like old work and things that you guys might be even curious about right now. Which is when I'm, doing this sort of sketches, first is generally even things like materials. Like as a teenager, as a young artist, what was I really interested in? And also what was the level of my sort of like educational experience? For me, back as a teenager, I was very much just into pencil drawing. So I love doing pencil work, and I would do pencil to inking. So this was a very sort of common, sort of process that many artists do still today, and one that I mainly learned from, just kind of like observing, not really observing, but more just analyzing the work from comic artists at the time. So when I was a teenager, the only kind of frame of inspiration of art that I mostly got were comics, things like Western comics to mangas and so forth. Illustration a little bit here and there. Never really looked at concept art because back in the 90s, concept art books existed like the Star Wars one, but I didn't really know much about what concept art was, at that time. Nor did I understand even things like how it fit into the production pipeline and different sort of industries from film, animation to even games. So I watched animation, like Western animation and whatnot. But comics was like my main sort of source of inspiration. Source of inspiration based on subject matter to also then some of the materials and the working process of how to actually get from A to B, things like sketching work to drawing, and of course the different sort of stages that the production of a comic would go through. And how I would find this stuff out is obviously talking to friends, and they would find information, or maybe some artists that I was introduced to. I'd go to a Comic Con once in a while, and so at the time, you know, were some of these pieces very much inspired by comic artists that I knew about? So the question from the one I just got was, did I have some favorite comic artists at the time? And I did. Um, some of them I knew the names of, and some of them I didn't. So I just knew the piece of art. For instance, like a piece like this one, The Predator, is very much based on the original Alien versus Predator comic series from Dark Horse. I know the name of the comic artist, but off the top of my head, I cannot remember it. If anybody can look it up real quickly, just Google it. Alien versus Predator, the comic artist. He did the covers and the interior, I believe, but I can't remember the name. Anyways, did I actually look at those comics and draw from that directly one to one? And there were times in which I would do that, which was kind of the study based imitation. I would do a copy of a cover or something like that, right? I've done those sort of things. Even when I was much younger, as like preteen or something like that, would I even do things like tracing? I did, right? So it was very once in a while, put a piece of paper on top of like a tracing paper just to feel it out. I remember I did one of a help. No, I'm sorry, it was a Wolverine cover that Mike Mignola had done. Phil Norwood, that's who it is. Thank you for that information. So Phil Norwood was the artist for the Alien versus Predator, and I just loved the way he drew the Predator at the time. And I watched the original Predator movie in the 80s and as a kid. And so when the comic came out, I had like one or two issues. No, I'm sorry, no, it wasn't issues. It was a graphic novel that I borrowed from a friend. So I didn't even own the comic. I borrowed it from a friend, and I love the series so much. And so this was actually my take on it. So did I have the comic out and did I draw from it directly, or was this from an actual shot, a panel from that comic? And it wasn't. This is my interpretation of it, and I would mimic his shapes or his details or his designs of the predator as closely as I can make it. So again, this like insignia is not one from the comic. I just made it up as a kid. Um, so that's why, some people like this, when people see stuff like this, they ask that question of like, how much of this is like copying it? Are you looking at something? Are you finding a reference? There's definitely nothing wrong with anything of that sort of process. Because like I said, even at this time, I was doing that. I would look at something and then I would draw from it directly, right? I would see the inspiration. I'd say, oh, I like that piece and I want to draw it. I would do it, right? So a copy was a very sort of a common tech, not a technique, but more of a common practice that as I myself would do, and no one told me to do it. It was just something I felt like was fun. So because it was fun, I wanted to recreate something that I found very enjoyable, aesthetic in terms of a piece of art. I wanted to have my own, kind of like not version, but I wanted a piece of it, right? Um, the question of how long has it been since we last started? We just started. So yeah, style studies, as drawing is hard is asking, is something that's difficult but necessary, and that's what it was for. It was to kind of curate a sense of taste, of aesthetics and style that I really enjoyed. And so even stuff like this, these are like little mechanical designs, and this is all in the same year. Okay, would this be chronological in terms of like the page order? I'm gonna say it is because I don't remember ever taking it apart and reorganizing it and putting it back together. So what you're looking at right now was the sketchbook as it was left back in 2000. All right. Um, I do remember doing these, some of them. And comment here from Dara was wishing you well. You're at work right now. You can't watch along, but yeah, I appreciate the comment. Thank you guys for joining in right now at the moment too. But I remember doing some of these sketches. I don't remember exactly how it felt exactly per se or how it was. 'Cause it was so long ago. You're talking about 25 years. But I do remember the ideas in some of them. And I do remember sometimes maybe a certain piece of maybe the way it did feel coming out, but certainly I know where the inspirations are coming from. So a lot of this sort of stuff I'm looking at like Shiro, Masamune Shiro and whatnot. Very much like the Ghost in the Shell or the Appleseed sort of stuff, and the especially mechanical design. So even before I was introduced to the world of concept art, because I didn't really understand about the concept design industry until about 2001, 2002. And because you have to understand that this sketchbook is precursor to when I went to college. So I was in high school, graduated in 1999. This is a 2000 sketchbook. In 2000 and no, 2000, 2001, I went to a 2-year college in Oregon. And that was for like graphic design, illustration. And in 2001 to 2004, I was in art center college. So this was before my time going into the art center college and sort of educational career to find out more about different industries. But even then, in 2000, I was interested in design, not really even knowing design processes and inadvertently knowing what I was trying to do. I just found it fascinating to find out about functionality and how to make things work. This is all pencil work, and this would just be marker. And some of these I probably would have done. These I would have done marker first, and then I probably would have applied pencil afterwards. I barely remember the, actually physically doing these. So this is just me coming up with different ideas. So it continues. So this was a multi-page thing where I was like thinking of some sort of tank machine walking thing, most likely because I saw it either from Ghost in the Shell, the Fuchikomas, or the walking tank thing. And I wanted to create my own like version of it, right? So here I was trying to do things like orthographics and not even knowing really what orthographics even are. So how did I get the idea of doing stuff like this? And to be quite frank, I don't know. Okay. Because nobody told me to draw like this or to do these sort of studies or do different sort of like iterations and mechanical studies and stuff like that. Did I look at machinery, right? No, I didn't. I would just make up these things of joints like, oh, it goes that way and goes that way. Was I looking at pieces of art that other artists were doing as part of design, like Shiro, that would give me some indicator as to like what they were thinking about? Sure. But was I studying like pistons and hydraulics and joint structures and stuff? I wasn't. So again, a lot of these are being made up at the time. So here's like the cockpit panel of that piece, and then I even like thought about the inner frame. You have to understand that this book right now I rediscovered literally the other day. Okay. And I haven't seen these pages, some of these pages in many number of years. Some of them, some of these books, this book in particular, I probably had seen, it's been more than 10 years, more than 10 years. And this is from 2000, so like 25 years ago. But I would find it once in a while again, kind of flip through it. But the last time I seen this book was probably more than 10 years ago. So some of the pages I barely remember what they were. And then at the time, again, I was right 19. I was still interested in human figure. So I would do a lot of like anatomical studies, but I would do them out of books. So were these coming out of books? And they were not. These were me, making them up, being inspired by anatomical studies I've done in the past, in that time. So of course you have to understand that I would have had different sort of sketchbooks even as a teenager. This one I actually sort of treated more like a higher quality sketchbook in a manner where I really wanted to kind of pay attention to do as best I could. I remember that feeling because I liked this book. But there were other sketchbooks that I had where I would do like, rougher maybe sketches or studies and whatnot out of books and copies. But these were me using that as best I could. Did I have references of, photographs of, um, you know, portraits or humans and torsos and heads? I didn't. You have to also understand this is the year 2000. Okay, so I didn't have a phone. I didn't own one. I was 19. The first cell phone I ever got was in art center. So I was again 22, probably around that time. It was only a couple years afterwards. So as a teenager, at home, that's where I lived. I went to a 2-year college. We had a computer, but it was a crappy compact PC home desktop, and I could find images here and there. But again, 25 plus years ago, it wasn't my thinking of, oh, I should find a reference image online and draw from that. Didn't really do this. We have a question over here from Tiago, which is, to get better, is it necessary for someone to always have clean sketches like those, or can I draw more scribbly, just to have a quickly understanding of a topic of a drawing? So there is no right or wrong here. There's no reason why it has to be clean or rough. It's more about the idea of what you're intending to do. If you're intending to find out how this is supposed to feel or look or constructed or different inspirations, there's no reason why you can't do a rough sketch. And just because it's a rough sketch doesn't mean it's a bad sketch. Your intention is to understand it. So to understand something is what I call sketching. We can also call this not really a sketch. This could be considered more for me as a drawing. So I may have done some prior sketches to apply to the drawing to produce not for the reasons of being clean, but to be used for some purpose of things like, oh, maybe I want to, photocopy this and print. Of course, I didn't do that when I was a teenager because I just drew it simply for fun. But today, if I wanted to create a piece of art to sell, Comic Cons, conventions, prints, online, make a book, well, then, I might reach a certain level of quality, but there could be precursor sort of work that came beforehand, right? So it's more about circumstance, use and purpose behind it, intention of mind, all that sort of stuff. But having a rougher sketch, something a bit scribbly or something clean, there's no wrong with any of those sort of approaches. It's more about why and how are you trying to do things, right? If you are trying to produce something that is relatively clean because you're intending for it, it's used for something, but you can't seem to reach that level of quality or comparison to what you're seeing, well, then that's simply just a skill issue based on time, right? So what advice would I give to a lot of beginners? Well, you have to understand that right here, what you're looking at is sketchbooks from when I was 19 years old, which is me beginning my stages. And from the beginning of that, I allowed myself just to draw. Was like a drawing like this used for something? No, it wasn't. It was just because something I liked, because I'd seen something prior and I thought it was a really cool aesthetic. What was I looking at in this stage? I was actually really, really enjoying people like Muka, Alfonso Muka. And again, this is 2000. All right. So here's proof, evidence. This is the year 2000. And this is a pencil drawing. Did I do like an underlay? Probably a light one. And I can see there might have been a little bit of erasing here and there. And I did a nice clean like line on top of that afterwards. But these sort of patterns and shapes are coming from that sort of Art Nouveau inspiration styling. But because, that's just stuff that I saw. But was I drawing something that I was looking at? Not really. I was just making up this character. And I made up all these elements. I was still using those as reference of inspiration. So there's a difference in terms of like looking at, let's say, like an artwork or a photograph, and you could do a one-to-one copy, but there's also then looking at as inspiration to fuel your creative, sort of expression onto the page. You're wondering how would you go about taking a design further after you made a thumbnail or a small ideation of it? Well, obviously, it's to be able to refine, compare and contrast other sort of like avenues of path of design you can go for, and then making sure to see if that design is sort of applicable to the project that you're trying to make, right? To the world even too. And that's how you want to go about into the next stage. It's just about making it cleaner, not necessarily. It's very much making sure that that design fits into the nature of what you're trying to develop. So design is about problem solving. So what kind of problem solving are you trying to do? Is it a design problem based on aesthetics and visual only, or is it a design problem based on the functions of a world and the rules of it? So if I'm making a game, I have a world, it's this kind of functionality based on the set rules of the physics and the science and the fields and the materials. Well, then I have all the understanding. So design can go into many tiers of thinking. But it could purely just be also aesthetic. So now we'll find other aesthetic designs of things that I've looked at from other people and try to match up to it. Does it match up to that same aesthetic design quality? That's kind of the next stage from there. If it doesn't, I work towards it. If it does, I'll clean it up, right? These are just made up characters, sketches. What you'll then now notice, and this is something that I only recognized in the mid 2000s when I was in college, okay? And when I was in high school, it's not to say that I wasn't trying to draw the full figure, and it's not something I was actually fully even like aware of at the time. What you'll notice a lot of times in my sketches of figurative work, character work, even stuff like this, you know, like there's a little bit of interaction here with two characters, is that what you'll notice is that most drawings of the character that I have, well, maybe the predator is kind, well, it's still there, is that I'm actually only really drawing a partial of the character. It's, you know, like upper torso, you know, even that cleaned up drawing of that Art Nouveau styling that I had earlier, it's just upper torso to maybe mid leg. I cover the legs, upper torso, right? I wasn't called out on this until much later. Upper torsos. Here is a situation where I have a quick sketch of a design of a robot mech thing where I did do like a full, but it was only partial, right? But it was just like an idea that I had. And I wrote down some notes and what I was supposed to do. But you know, at the time, I wasn't really thinking about it. But it wasn't until later where I showed my sketchbooks to like professional artists, and they were like, "You seem to draw a lot of half figures. You know, you should really do a lot more full." And I didn't realize it. And I looked at it as like, "Oh my gosh, I really do only draw torso. I don't really draw the full figure at all." Here again, just torsos and torsos. And the reason why I think for myself at the time was because I liked to detail the crap out of drawings, right? So I would like hatch like crazy, or I want to get into the aesthetics and the specific small parts, you know. And so I wouldn't allow myself to pull the camera back to be able to see the full figure because, you know, if I drew torso, it obviously took up a certain amount of space. It was more comfortable for me to draw half figures. So that's where I kind of stood, not thinking that, not to say it was a bad thing, but then it didn't really allow me to also get comfortable with the full figure. But then when I did draw the full figure, I usually felt probably I was quite nervous about things like feet and legs because I wasn't that comfortable or great at them. As you can see here, I cut off the feet, right? Or I would draw them separately. So I would try to practice it. It's like, I gotta draw the feet well. But then it was just, these are studies. Who is this from? Figure Silhouette Studies. It doesn't say a name on it. I remember this one I made up. This one I made up. But these were from images from something. I can't remember what it was. I'm going to go through some of the questions real quickly here. What's the hardest thing you ever had to draw from imagination or subject that you still have a hard time drawing today? Today, I don't really have a hard time drawing anything as a subject matter as much. However, could I say that within all subject matters, there's a degree of difficulty, even though I can approach all things? Yes, there obviously is that's the case. I would say more character, animal-based things I find the most comfortable. I would say mechanical objects and mechs and robots are right underneath that. They're pretty comfortable. Vehicles are kind of mid-tier. I like them, but there can be some vehicles that are just a bit challenging that requires more thinking. I find landscapes to be a bit more straining in terms of making sure I can comprehend and make sure everything is in a kind of in a working manner, right? I still like to draw landscapes and exteriors and architectural forms, but I would say that that's probably the more strenuous sort of subject. Another question is, after drawing directly with ink for a while, you feel like you've hit diminishing returns. Should I go back to more sketchy mediums like pencil and ballpoint? Well, at that point, it's about being able to integrate all mediums together and find a good balance for yourself. Hitting a plateau with an ink is really not necessarily about the material, but maybe more about your process and what you're doing. Maybe you start to exclude some of the construction out. Maybe you try to find different sort of techniques and how you build something, but stick with the ink potentially from there, right? Ron's asking, how do you choose where to place the inky comic black shading that's found in comic style? You've been getting into some comics like Silver Surfer and Batman. Well, this is where you would look at other artists' interpretation. What have they done? Try to then mimic those at first to feel out, well, how do they choose where it goes? Of course, you don't want to just stay within a similar copy style as to what that artist is going to be, unless you're trying to do that. For myself, it's more about an integration, natural balance of like finding the elements of things that I like from multiple people, and then I would kind of put my twist on it. From there, I would also study from life a lot. So playing with lighting, playing with photography is really big. So understanding and being able to stylize that is in my opinion, also the next best thing. Um, More pencil sketches, year 2000 still. I loved just creating characters at the time. Again, this is when I was 19 years old, and at 19, you would think that I would only just, look at known properties and brands, and which I did. They're obviously out of this entire book right now so far, the only character that you're seeing that is obviously existing is the Predator, and everything else after that is just stuff and me making it up. Manga X Anime is asking any tips for learning anatomy. You're lost. Well, here's me at 19 studying out of books. The first step, what you can do is look at what's already come before. Look at the traditional side, look at some of the contemporary artists playing with things, look at known standards of techniques and copy them as much as possible. This sort of copying can be then eventually integrated something of your own creation from there. But being lost, I think is more a factor when I'm reading from your question, is a sense of this urgency. You're trying to go too fast. You need to honestly just let this become a more of a natural behavioral thing as a day-to-day creation of sketching, drawing, studying, copying, producing, uh, without this set timeline, by thinking I got to make sure that I know anatomy well enough now so I can start making stuff today. You don't need to do that. There is no today. There is no tomorrow when it comes to stuff like this. This is about you doing it every day because you just love doing it. But if you set this sort of potential expectation by I got to meet this standard or meet this timeline deadline now, well then you're always going to be disappointed because you're never going to get what you want out of it. These are just these sort of portraits are supposed to be of my friend and me. So I used to draw a lot with my good friend Izzy back when we were together in high school, and we continued to hang out and draw. And we would do this even all the way through art center, college days, and even as we were professionals. And we still like to like share ideas and sketch together when we could. And that sort of stuff in high school we did all the time. So we'd use each other as subject matter sometimes as characters, and we make up designs using each other. Are there any exercises to improve proportion? The only exercise you can do is repetition. Now, so let's say I looked at this pen and there's a proportion to this pen, proportion based on ratio, size, width, diameter. So the length of this compared to the length of the cap. Now you can measure it, say, okay, what is the actual length and measurement of this based on whatever measurement system you use, metric or imperial, and then you would say, okay, the length of that, and you would then do a one-to-one onto a piece of paper. But most of us, if not all artists, do what? You look. You look and you observe and you interpret onto the page. So you are going to either scale this down to a small sketch, or you're going to scale it up to a bigger one, or try to match it up one to one, but you're still eyeballing it. How is the length of this compared to the length of that? So how can you control proportion in this situation? You can't. You're going to get it wrong the first time around. If anything, you're not going to get it perfect at all. So how can I get close enough to the proportion of this pen? By repeating it. By repeating it, I can now gauge the comparison of, in my drawing and sketch compared to the actual thing I'm looking at, does it look close or does it look off? Sometimes you can't tell. Why? Because you don't have the experience of it yet. So because of the lack of experience and observation, the sensitivity of your judgment calls of length and diameter and size and whatever thing is not that accurate enough. So through practice, many hundreds and not thousands of hours of practice over the many years will hone that skill. You need to hone it like a blade. So eventually, as you then draw from observation, you'll get closer to your immediate sort of visual interpretation of it. But to get to that closeness of it, you got to then repeat it. So if I looked at it, it's like, okay, oh, that pen cap is a bit too short. Do it again. Well, I got to make it a bit longer. Is that closer? Is that off? So only through comparison, trial and error, repetition is the only way to get closer in proportion. There's no other thing you can do unless you took a photograph of this pen, put a piece of tracing paper on top of it, and traced it. That's a one-to-one. or you literally measured this with a ruler and converted those numbers onto the page. But you would never do that, right? Um, all of us use our eyes to observe and to place on the page. I hope that makes sense. That's a Bruce Lee. Remember that photograph. This is a note on this right here. This is what it says. That his arm looks broken. I remember that arm as I couldn't figure it out. Like, how do I remember I drew this one a couple times. There's a bunch of erasing marks on there, and I was frustrated with this arm. And I left it there, and it's like, I don't like it. This is just studies I looked at. Good question here, which is, was drawing these back in the day very consuming compared to nowadays for you? Yes and no. I would say yes in the fact that it took way more mental sort of like processing, trying to figure out like what do I want and how do I do this, right? And then the actual physical capacity, because the way I would draw, the amount of lines I would need to produce, but the just general dexterity, control of the tool wasn't really there. So it took a lot more energy out of me. But at the same time, the level of fun factor and interest as it was back then as it is today hasn't changed. This is obviously inspired by Akira by Kaneda's. More figurative stuff. I would try to like different angles. Was I looking at stuff? I can't remember. I don't think I was. I can't remember literally if I was actually looking at something or not. So John Gunn's asking, is this from reference or imagination? The majority of this book is from the imagination. There's going to be a couple of pieces that I know are going to be from drawing from me looking at something. But something like this, there are pieces that are me making it up. But there's some I'm looking at something. I can't remember. So what I would do, like something like this with a Darth Maul, is that I had looked at a photograph of that character, and so I can help design the pattern. But this pose, this sketch is me making it up. I was doing this for something specific. As you can see, this area, it was for a wizard cover. I was trying to produce my own wizard covers. If you don't know what wizard is, it was a comic magazine at the time. So you can see here another wizard magazine. This one was inspired by my friend Andy Park. Andy doesn't know about this sort of stuff. Back when I was, it was in the late 90s and stuff. Andy Park was a concept artist, viz dev lead. I guess you would even call him an art director over at Marvel Cinematics. He mainly did covers and comic art. Specifically, one that most people know him for was Tomb Raider. And I was familiar to his work back at the time. Today, it's interesting where I can actually even just like, talk to him and call him a friend. But I was inspired by his work, and so I remember doing a Tomb Raider, and I had couple of his comics and his covers, and I would use them as inspiration, not as a copy, but inspiration. So I would maybe try to look at what he would do for certain things and try to produce my own version of it. The crow. These are me making it up. These are no references. I'm not looking at stuff. So back in that time, also when I was a teenager, I just used to just sketch and draw just out of my head for fun. So why didn't I use, photographs and references? For one thing, it was never introduced to me in that sort of working process order. No one ever told me, it's like, hey, you can look at this reference photograph and use that to draw from directly. I didn't honestly even know. I mostly only looked at illustrations, comic art and illustrations. I rarely looked at photographs when I was a teenager. So the only photographs I may have looked at times were out of books, because I didn't have a phone to look up digital images, and we didn't have that kind of search engine back in the time. Books was the only thing I used. So I do remember I used to have this really cool book on guns that I bought at the Borders bookstore back when Borders used to exist. And I had a couple other books that I owned as well too. But those books, it's like my parents bought them for me, some of them. But most of the books, I had a very few amount at the time. I had to sparingly buy because either I had not that much money or my parents buy them for me. This is a Ghost in the Shell inspiration, another wizard cover. And I drew this out of my head. I was trying to draw a jet. I didn't draw it very successfully. I remember I had a hard time with this one. This is all blue pencil. So back in the time, blue pencil to me was like, oh, this is what all artists do, right? You do it blue pencil underlay, and you pencil it, and you ink it. So there's like this triple process that I used to do. Going back to some of the questions over here. So I'm going to scroll back a little bit only. Jerome was asking, I always wonder how you manage your time drawing when I saw your sketchbook tour on Proco. So the work ethic is built off of when I was a teen, because I used to sketch every single day. Even though I had homework, even though I had other, sort of things I had to do as a kid, I always gave myself time to sketch. Not that I actually gave myself time. I made the time because I just wanted to do it. I just sat down and drew, and nobody bothered me. Nobody ever said, you can't sketch. Um, as long as I got my other stuff done, which I usually did, uh, in terms of the level of quality among those other things, like let's say like homework, I was an average student, a B student really, maybe a B plus if I'm pushing it, but more in reality, more like a B minus student. Average, like general education, I was kind of whatever at. Writing skills were terrible, math skills were horrible, um, maybe even thinking skills were whatever too. But uh, I just like to draw. That's all I did. And nobody really bothered me that much because of it. Another interesting question is how can you make learning the fundamentals more engaging and fun? Well, notice what I'm doing here at 19. This sort of stuff back over here, let's say like the anatomical sort of studies, right? These can be seen as foundations. Like, oh, I got to draw the arm from this artist, or I got to study the photograph or anatomy of that thing. And over time, this can become very mundane and very tedious to the point where it's just like it's not as interesting, because how many arms can you draw, until you feel like you're exhausted of drawing arms from all these different angles and hands. What really the fun factor in keeping it engaging is to use it for something, create with it, right from the immediate get-go. You don't wait. You don't say I have to get good enough in anatomy to a certain level and then I can be okay to start making up characters. That doesn't happen. There's no one or something that's going to tell you that, hey, you're good enough now with anatomy, now you can go start drawing your own characters. It's not going to happen. It's just a gradual segue into it, mainly purely on interest. I'm interested in making a character. Oh, this is an assassin of some kind, inspired by Joe Mad comic style, because I was a huge fan of Joe Madura at the time. He did a lot of the X-Men, all that sort of stuff. So me and my friend Izzy used to like copy his work like crazy. And so I would try to integrate his styling into my own shape design, anatomically of sizing and form, proportion. I would try to bring it in as much as possible. Capcom was a huge, inspiration. Akiman and Bengus. Things like this pectoral, deltoid, it's all inspiration from Capcom. Was I using the art directly? No, but I looked at it well enough and copied just enough in the past that I can use it for my own. But then that sort of like, fundamental study that can all be boring, it'll always stay boring because you're not actually using it. It's just now relegated to this area of practice. And so because you don't move past that, it stays in that sort of mentality. How could you not become bored of that thing, right? So you got to break that border and use it more directly in the immediacy as you begin to learn your techniques. And don't feel the sense of anxiety or nervousness by saying that I'm not good enough. There's so many other people that are better, or they'll judge me. I don't have the right say to do what I want to do. As an artist and creative, doesn't matter what age, doesn't matter what level of experience, doesn't matter what you want to do. If you want to place it on the page and just see for yourself to find out how fun it can be, you do it, right? You don't look for someone's approval or validation to say that, hey, you're good enough now, you can do this. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen that way in life at all, in anything that we pursue. So, even stuff like this, like comics, I would just like thumbnail comic pages. I didn't do anything with this stuff. I think I just had an idea of a small story. I don't remember what this stuff was, but I just sketched it out. This is kind of a sampling of like penciling to inking. I was like pencil something and I'll try to ink it. I was more inspired by more of a bolder graphic styling that a friend of mine did in high school as well. I was actually kind of envious of his work because I thought his styling was so like identifiable to his, and he had a much more graphic to even, I would say, graph styling, graffiti styling, because he used to spray paint on walls and do bombs and what that kind of stuff. But he was a big into that styling that I was actually really liking, and I had mix and matches of stuff. Me and Izzy were more like comic artists, and my other friend was more into things like graphics. So I would pull from different areas a lot of times, and I'll try to mimic those things, making my own stuff up. And again, making more characters up, but still inspired by other stuff. I remember this being inspired by Joe Mad's work and the way he would design characters, and I would create my own versions of it. I would even give him names and stuff like this. Notice everything is still half torso. I never drew the full body. I stayed away from it. Half torso, half torso, half torso. Never drew the legs. Never drew the legs. Never drew legs. I think if I if I could say it. But here's the thing: there are examples in which I can show you that I drew full body. Obviously, there's being one of them. This is half body. So again, more characters. I think this was inspired by that one game. Um, oh my gosh, it was a Xbox game. The guy that had the night vision goggles on. The hell was that game called? Um, it's very kind of like iconic, headgear, night vision goggle thing that he had, and a multitude of other things I looked at too. Aurora was asking, do you ever feel anxious to draw, and how did you overcome that? Well, I mean, as a kid, I don't remember ever recognizing that fear or acknowledging it, to be honest with you. And the reason why is because, back then I used to draw a lot with pencil. So I would just erase it, just try again. And a lot of times because I knew what I was looking at, again, as I said, I would do a lot of inspiration sketching, copy-based sketching at a younger kid. That also took away the fear because I already knew what I was looking at and what I wanted. I just needed to bring that over to my page. So there never really was an attachment of this feeling of anxiety or fear of the blank page ever for me since I was a child. And I think because I established that, like for instance, if somebody came up to me when I was a young person, like maybe 10 or 11 years old, and handed me a blank piece of paper and said, now draw something, draw this thing without giving me any sort of visual guide or something like that, I probably would have been a lot more nervous. And if that had been a perpetual experience, I probably would have then my brain would have been trained to react that way to a blank page, but that never really happened. um, all of this stuff was not necessarily introduced to me. It was me being curious to go just do it on my own. So because of that, it was a choice I was making on my own self, not a choice relegated to me by some other party. So because of this, there was no fear attachment to it. So today, I still very much feel that way. It's like a blank piece of paper to me is exciting. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. That's the way it kind of was. But I know that's not the way it is for everybody. So unfortunately, I don't really have an advice on that because I don't have that same sort of experience and I can't necessarily empathize with that. And I don't want to give you some made up answer like, oh, if you just do it like this, you'll get over your sort of like fear of it. I don't have an answer. But I will say that it's a real thing. And I've come across thousands of people and students who have that same sort of feeling towards it. So it's very real and valid for sure. But in terms of how I can like help coerce or advise moving away from that, I don't have one. And if anything else, it may never go away. What you have to eventually come to terms with when it comes to these sort of like fear-based things and creation of stuff that you make for yourself is that it's a very normal part of the process, and you have to again be familiar to that working order. And as you are recognizing the signs and the patterns, being able to then adapt to that. Like, how do I then put myself in a mental state, physical state where I know it's coming, but I know certain exercises or certain processes or certain ways of approaching it where I can feel comfortable, right? Executing the thing I need to do. So then training becomes a part of it. Do you think if someone had introduced me to studying photo references, you have been doing it? Yeah, I think so. If somebody said, hey, do it like this, look at a photograph, draw from that. Nobody ever told me this though. So this is pretty much why I mostly drew from things I looked at as illustrations or comic art, or made my stuff up, basically. Do I think, technological limitations back then, lack of access to things like photo references or social media probably helped me? Probably. I think, the generation I grew up in was kind of like the best balance. I'm actually happy I come from that generation, where I remember a time where computers and phones don't exist, and I remember the times when those things are introduced. And I'm living in a time when they've advanced so far, so I was born in 81, and He-Man's coming out, the movie, and it's crazy to me it's still like that sort of property is still so popular. But I guess I understand because my generation has now grown up to the point where we can actually make that sort of media using these old sort of stories and properties that we grew up with as a kid. But as a kid, I have memory, in the 80s, waking up as a kid, turning on the TV, this giant box TV, and that intro song, not the song, but the actual, there's that little rainbow thing that comes across, the production company, and then the actual song that He-Man comes on. I have distinct memory of that stuff. So to me, it's very nostalgic. But that's the thing. I come from that sort of era where we are transitional, right? Come from a time where there was no tech that we can really be hands-on with, social wise or immediate wise, to then today where we get the news right off our hands. Sorry, the phone keeps zooming in and out. If there's I don't know if anybody here is like a buzz, but I don't. There's no buzzing going off my phone. There might have been some notification stuff. Maybe that's what it was. So I'm kind of scrolling back down to the current chat. So I apologize if there's some questions or comments. Splinter Cell, thank you. That's the one I was looking for. Sorry, I'm just only catching up to the chat right now. There we go. So question here is, what's my opinion on meditative or mindless drawing? I think it's fine if you like it. I don't really do that. We could say mindless drawing where you have this media paper in front of you and you just kind of like move and just see what happens, right? It's just more, dare I say, even instinctual, maybe. But I guess meditative, where you get to a mental state where you loosen up that sense of control, and you start to go again, right? But I don't really do that kind of stuff. Most of my kind of work is so much more based on intention, to its fault, because sometimes it can be so logical that it doesn't produce something very creative at times, because you tend to kind of regurgitate the same sort of thing you do over and over. But that sort of habit also helps refine and sort of like sharpen that tool set. And so there's benefits when it comes to what you pursue as a skill. But to be open to try new techniques and methods, I'm certainly not against it. Just sort of meditative, mindless sketching and drawing. But is it something I would do today in my professional field? Probably not. You know, this Tarzan drawing. Here's a full body. Feet are kind of ghostly. It's kind of, I tried something. Legs are kind of okay. Um, Anyways, creatures. I love dinosaurs. This, I remember being more inspired. This sort of like hatching method came from something very specific, the line work wise. And I'm trying to pinpoint exactly who it may have been, but I feel like it was a mixture of things. What I do remember is that I was looking at artists like Jeff Darrow at the time. And Jeff Darrow, back in the late 90s, had put out things like Hard Boiled. I think maybe even Rusty and the Little Boy Robot had come out at the time as well too. But his styling of the way he would hatch on monsters and creatures was kind of similar to this. Missed question. So you're asking, what's my favorite car? Well, to be honest with you, I'm a huge fan of Shelby Cobras. I was a fan of Shelby Cobra since I was a kid. My father had a little model die-cast kit of a Shelby Cobra, and I was so enamored by that thing. And I've always been a big fan of muscle cars, 60s and 70s muscle cars. Today, I actually own a Bullet Mustang, the 2008 Mustang. I like V8s, I like Detroit muscle. And the Shelby Cobra, to me, is like such an iconic car, especially mostly for the engine. Obviously, the body is a different sort of design, European design, but especially its history in racing and all that sort of stuff. Then, of course, the GT40, right? So Ford designs, Shelby designs, huge fan of them. I like retro, I like old school. Any mentorship I would recommend? I mean, I offer a mentorship program, but I only do it one or twice a session, and I'm usually very specific who I work with. Is drawing with a fine liner with a guide without a guideline a different skill tree than sketching with a pencil with guidelines? Yes, absolutely. Uh, you really like the art style? How much do you recommend a beginner to practice day to improve at least a bit? Doesn't matter like how much or how long. It's just that you practice every day, right? And you practice on things that you like looking at stuff from, as I said, comic artists I'm looking at, or illustrators, or people that you find on social media. Draw from them directly at first, especially as a beginner. Have I ever seen a manga that you still look at today? And have I ever heard of the Jujutsu Kaisen? Yeah, I'm actually watching that anime right now, and I'm caught up. And they're doing a very good job on season 3. So I do like uh, Jujutsu Kaisen. I was a little bit kind of like on it in the first, especially the second season. It felt like it dragged on forever. First season was pretty good, but I'm liking what's going on currently. Is there a current or a older, maybe even a general manga that I used to look at that I still love now? I would say probably the one that I can turn to anytime would be Battle Angel Alita. That's the one manga that I can endlessly look at, the original mangas. Do I have any particular instructional art books I used or recommend? At this time, I didn't have any. Well, actually, no. I'm sorry. I lied. The one I used to use was How to Draw the Marvel Way. That is the one I used as a child. It's the only art book instructional I ever got as a kid. Here's a full body, but again, legs are hidden. It's all in the shadow. This is stuff I'm just making up. I remember, I'm just making these up. I remember that. This is still inspired by Joe Mad. But this was me making it up. There's slightly variances of styles you'll see. Even back when I was a teenager, I was still trying to like figure out like what I wanted. Like this is a different style of face. This is a specific artist also, especially the eyes. I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but these are Joe Mad hands. These are Capcom muscles. That's a side view of a Joe Mad head. And then I would blend and mix and match stuff together. This was a very different styling. It's almost like a hybrid of things. What would I be? What would I consider? Figurative anatomy. Second, perspective. Third, observational drawing. Still life, right? Or observations of different subjects. Those are the three trinities. This was inspired by this stuff. This is from Frank Cho. This is before Frank Cho does what he does now. And I'm a bigger fan of Frank Cho's old work. If some of you guys know who he is, maybe. I don't really follow his work that much anymore because he mostly does like comic covers and these really big illustration, and they're all very traditional looking. He does a lot of ink and hatching and whatnot, and he is very good at what he does. But I love, and what he used to do was make these comic strips called Liberty Meadows, and I was a huge fan of it at the time because I thought it was well drawn, and I love the sense of humor. It was a bit of adult humor, but I just thought they were quite humorous and aesthetic. So I was a big fan of his styling of design at the time. So I used to like create characters in a similar nature to a degree. So stylistically, I like to like jump around. I would go from something like serious to this, you know. Just catching up to some of the chat. What are my thoughts on the art industry right now? There's no better time than now to be a part of it, especially as an independent or going into the field. It's tumultuous, you know, as it always has been. Somebody might say, but it's such a, you know, hard industry now, and people are not finding jobs and people being fired. But you know what? That's the way it was 20 years ago also. You know? Back when I worked in the game industry full time in 2000, you know, from 2005 to 2013, you know, I must have changed jobs like every year almost. The longest I ever stayed at a studio was 3 years. And so at the end of those cycles, I was laid off. No, we have no more money, or the project's done, or we have, you know, different interests, or the company's like being bought up, and so they let go. I've been laid off like 4 or 5 times, you know. That's just the nature of the industry. It's corporate jobs. That's just what it is. So if people are thinking right now it's such a hard time, to be honest with you, it's not that much different than it was back then. It's just that you have way more people doing it today, but it's also way more public, right? Because it's not so much more on social media. 20 plus years ago, or 15 years ago, you didn't hear much about the news of this company being shut down or that news of this thing. Yeah, within our industry, you would hear about it, but in general public, nobody cared or knew. But because there's so many people now that know about these industries and different companies, and they're so on track of what they do, you know, it seems like it's a rough time out there. I'm not gonna lie. Of course, it is still rough. You know, like the COVID situation changed the world. You know, so how we work and what the industry is spending on their general budgets and who they're planning to hire and where the work is even going and technological scares, it's changing the fabric of our industry. So it's not exactly the same, but there are similarities. There are things that still haven't changed that much. You know. Sorry, that ringing right there, that is my notification. Apologies. I should have turned that off, but I want to do it right now because I don't want to mess something up on the live stream. Before we go to more questions, what I'm going to do right now, and again, I need to skip all the way down to the chat, so if I missed a bunch of questions, you can ask in a minute. What we looked at the moment was one sketchbook. We are going to look at one more book, and I'm going to draw from there, okay? This is a different book. And I need to adjust my camera again real fast, so please excuse the shake of the visual. I'm going to bring it up a little bit higher because this is a slightly bigger format. The stickers in the 90s were giant. Yeah. Maybe that was just my selection. I don't know. Those Dragon Ball stickers are pretty big. The size of my hand. They're pretty massive. I don't even remember where I got these. So this portfolio book Um, I want to say is it's about a year or two older than the sketchbook that you guys looked at. Okay, so some of the work in here is when I was maybe 18, at the youngest 17. Okay, so we're actually going further back in time. Some of this stuff. So yeah, probably like 17, 18 years old. So the sketchbook you looked at is from the year 2000. So I would have been around 19 around this time. It's a couple years before I went to college. This is me now being directly in high school. So I was 17, 18 years old. Um, so you'll see an assortment of stuff in here, okay? And you might think, well, it doesn't seem that much different to the sketchbook, but you have to understand, this is only a year or two, right? So this is like a year before. There's a lot of interesting things in here. This is from 1999. That's what the year is on this one. This is a color pencil. This was that character, Don. Many of you who are younger probably don't even know who this character is. Joseph, Michael Linsner. That was the artist. I was actually a big fan of his work in the 90s. He's still around today and actually still actively producing Dawn. But I mean, again, I'm a fan at the time, and then I kind of fell off of it, and different interests come into play. But whenever I found interesting things, I would try to recreate their characters. So this Dawn character, I still have that first issue of Dawn, and I was collecting those sort of comics in the 90s as a teenager. Parents didn't know what the hell I was looking at, but whatever. Um, Anyways, I found this piece of art. Sorry, my garage door is opening for some reason. Apologies. I think they're doing a delivery or something like that. So weird. Anyways, whenever I found characters I really liked, I always try to do like a recreation of them, but rarely would I try to finish. Hello. Hey, I would try to finish like an actual character that was, a existing illustration and do a one-to-one copy. I would do those more for like study when I was even younger, like 10 years old or something like that. But once I got into my like teenage years in high school, I would honestly just generate my versions of them. So this is all Prismacolor, just ink. This is probably like a Bristol or something like that. But 1999. I haven't. So this particular book you're looking at right now, um, I haven't seen this in quite a long time. So the sketchbook that you saw earlier, I probably had seen a decade ago, but this book, I hadn't seen it in a while. And you'll have to excuse me because I'm going to close the garage door again because I don't want the outside noise and stuff coming in. So give me 1 second, please. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm in the garage right now. So for those of you that are joining in for the first, or at the moment, I am in my garage. So this is like a new workspace we kind of made for ourselves, and it didn't close. Sorry, the package on the floor got in the way. All right. Yeah, that was literally the Amazon delivery guy that opened my garage. I got to turn that thing off because you can do that where you can actually have the Amazon delivery person open your garage and deliver it. So he just like kind of opened it on me and walked in. Question is, am I planning to do more dynamic Bibles? Yes. So Dynamic Bible 2 will be this year. Stuff like this is interesting. This is when I was in my high school. So this is this high school that I went to, the Art and Communication High School. It was a magnet high school. So after 8th grade, when I was 13, 14 years old, my junior high art teacher, whose name was Mr. Abehazy, and he was a Native American, and he actually guided me quite a bit as a junior high school student. And he recommended me to go to this high school. So this high school, you have to actually go to the interview. And I brought a portfolio. And of course, that high school back in the time, this is 1994, when I went to this high school. It was actually more for like, kids that were kind of the weird ones, honestly. Today, it's actually a really reputable high school where it's like hundreds of students that go there for dance and music and acting and art. Back then, it was just a bunch of like, Cape kids and kids that like to draw and kind of like thrown off to the side. So I went there thinking it was a high school for arts, and it was still. But I grew a lot, and I enjoyed this high school so much. My experience there was hugely beneficial. Um, And so I did an actual gallery. This is April 16th. This was in 1998. This drawing, that's mech. And we had a small little gallery space. And I remember I just like put up a bunch of originals. This is 1999. This is pencil with inking, inspired by Joe Madigan. Here are some like studies I would do of anatomy artists. So this is study of, I can't remember who. It's obviously a really well-known artist. I can't pinpoint exactly who it was though. It's a classical master. This is 1998. And this was pencil with ink. If anybody recognizes these torsos from a specific artist, let me know. I can't remember who it was. I don't want to say it was Michelangelo, but maybe it was. Are there any subjects that you haven't drawn yet but would like to draw at some point in the future? I'm sure there's tons of things I haven't drawn, but I can't name it off the top of my head. Oh, it's a Da Vinci. Here's a Leonardo da Vinci muscle of the trunk, 98. Pencil sketch. I was trying to remember, like, what was that name? I almost want to say Michelangelo, which I did, but actually it's Da Vinci. I was a fan of Da Vinci's mechanical, like, design stuff that he did. Was it Rimmer? Oh, it is. William Rimmer. The name's right here. Rimmer, muscle of the torso. Nice one. I didn't remember it. Yeah, it is interesting, right, Jimmy? To like imagine what it was like at the time pre-internet era. We had internet, of course, right? Because we got our first computer at our home. Again, it was a compact, crappy Costco desktop computer. That was probably 1995. It was kind of like, the wave of computers had just come, and we even had an older computer than that. This is probably like early 90, like 93, 94. It was one of those like box computers with a keyboard attached to it. It was all just like, DOS and stuff like that. No internet, of course. But when that desktop computer came out, that was our first access to AOL. So, of course, I was on chats and stuff like that as a teenager, not knowing who the hell I was talking to. And it was a weird time for sure. And the dial-up modem, all that sort of stuff, the sound of it. And we have one or a couple of websites you can look at, but we barely spent time on the computer because there was nothing to look at. The internet was there, but there was nothing online. You might have emails, so you might email your friend once in a while. And it was more of a gimmick, right? It was just more for fun, but it wasn't an actual practical thing you could use. And the only thing we used the computer for eventually was to play computer games. I used to play the old LucasArts, like click to point adventure games and stuff, or like the overhead, like real time kind of battles, like what is that? The Command and Conquer, that kind of thing, Red Alert. That's what we played. No Pinterest, no art stations, no place to find images and stuff like that as collection. We could find images, a website where somebody would put together like an art gallery image site or something like this, but it was so minimal and very basic. Google existed, but it wasn't what it was back then. This was a redesign of the logo I did for my high school. So this is the original logo. This is 1998, and this is the redraw. This is the original, I think, or it might be the photocopy. The different scales of it. So even when I was a teenager in high school, I was asked to do certain, sort of like design things graphically, illustratively, whatever the case was. And this one, I remember the high school asked me to do. For studies. This is 98 also. You can see the bone, hips and femurs. Even then I was cutting off the legs. Here is old Michelangelo studies. This is also 98. So as you can see, even at the time when I was a teenager, I used to copy old masters, and nobody told me to. I think I had a book or two of this. I maybe even checked them out from the high school library. This is 1997. This is the year before 98. So here, 99, I was 18. This is 17 years old. This is 16 years old. It's kind of crazy. I haven't looked at this stuff in a very long time. I would almost dare say it's been, more than 15 years. So this was done with, it was kind of like this really crappy water paint that my parents bought me for my birthday one year. It was like in a briefcase, and it was in these tubes of really crappy plastic. I don't even know what kind of paint it was. Um, and it was like a water base. I want to say it was an acrylic, but it was whatever. Back then I didn't care. I was like, oh, cool, art materials, you know. But it was one that you would like buy at. I mean, today would be the equivalent of going to like a Michaels and getting it off the rack, right? It's just one of those really crappy art material things you buy for like Christmas gift. So it's very generic, off name brand. Um, Somebody's asking, are these from the imagination? And the thing is, they are. Even at 16 years old, this stuff I was drawing out of my head. Were they inspired by something? Absolutely. But was I drawing from that directly? I was not. Inspiration meaning I saw something that I liked. It was a cool character with a animal head, like a big cat's head. And so from that one inspiration, I would then create my interpretations of it, right? I would do my versions, like, I want to create my own character with a big cat head also, you know? So this one was the first one I had done. I remember that. I did this one first. I did this one second. I remember. There's another one in here of this similar kind of character, this one. This is 98. This is literally a year after this one. But I can't tell you what the inspiration was. But I made these up. Couple of the comments. Did you keep drawing because of the love of the drawing, or was there something that inspired you to keep drawing? No, I just love doing it. It's just nobody told me no, and there were a lot of inspirations eventually. But in the beginning, I just picked up a pen because it was just really interesting. If you would start your art journey today, what resources would you prioritize using for studying? Books, website, art genres, all of it. I would use all the same things I had done when I was a child back then. The new things today when it comes to social media, I would very much use. Today, I would jump on things like YouTube. I would jump on obviously art, Instagrams quickly on it, and I would use integrate. And no matter what the level of quality was, I would start posting stuff like crazy. I would even do videos and stuff like that, not claiming that I was some kind of professional or claiming that I was some, better quality artist than someone else. Never like that, right? You don't want to follow people like this, but because I just truly enjoyed making this sort of thing. But this was a pencil drawing with, I know what I was using for inking. This was a repeatograph because you can feel the ink on it. It's this really thick India ink. The paint's actually cracking. Wow. It's that old. 16. Was I having knowledge of forms of perspective? I had never heard of the word of perspective at that age. I want to get this one out because this was the first one. I remember I remember what it felt like doing this one because I liked it. What I was inspired by was definitely the armor pieces. This proportioning was something very specific. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I can't tell you exactly what it was. This is a blue pencil underlay. This is that water-based paint, acrylic. I was using repeatographs. And this white is a paint, may have been some color pencil. I was trying, yeah. You see how even the lines are, and I'm not trying to criticize my own work, but as a 16-year-old, hey, it's not too bad, And that's the thing also about this is I look at my old work from over 25 years ago, and I look at this as like, I still kind of like it. I think a lot of artists have a difficulty sharing their old stuff because they feel like, oh, it's so bad back then. It was like, compared to what people could do now, it's like I would never want to show this stuff. But I love seeing this old work. This is 99. So there's a assortment of stuff in here. So this is me at 16. This is me at 19. It does have a bit of Warcraft proportions. But the thing is, I didn't play World of Warcraft back then. I never played World of Warcraft at all, actually. This was coming more something from specifically either an anime or a video game of some kind, a Japanese video game. I'm pretty certain of that. I mean, it makes sense because Western comics didn't really do this anamorphic kind of stuff that much at all. They did, but maybe not to this styling. Old logos. I did this for somebody who asked me to design a logo for them. It's like a different version of it. And I made a bunch of like business cards and whatnot. It's not in here yet. Old comic. This is 99, I want to say also. I don't remember what it was for. And it was literally just one page. When you're drawing from your head, would you still be checking back with the illustration that inspired mid-drawing? Usually not. But I would say there are times in which it's always kind of there, right? So it's always kind of there to me for me to look at it, mainly purely for just inspiration. But there were times I wouldn't have remembered it, like, or I remember seeing that thing and I want to do my version. I did both, you know. But did I ever do like a mid check? Not really, because I just either had it or I didn't. 98, same paint. I remember this one. This is supposed to be a character from the Monkey King universe. So this is like my little Monkey King character. I think this is not the original because I had done this as a gift for somebody. Yeah, this is a photo. This is a print. This is a photocopy. I don't know what happened to the original. I know I gave it. I'm pretty sure I gave it to somebody. It was a gift for somebody. And I think they wanted a character like this in styling. But I wanted to have a copy of it, so I photocopied it. It's color pencil. Same size. Inspired by Shiro, right? And it was a Monkey King character. This is that Lotus character, that Lotus princess, something like that. That's a good name drop right there. Platinum. Battle Beasts. Kids right now, if you guys are in your 20s or younger, you probably have no idea what the hell Battle Beast is. I used to have a bunch of those toys. It wasn't that either. I know, because I know Battle Beast. This was my original character. Right here. This is called the Hare Hunter. This is 1998. And in high school, me and my friend Izzy would create comic characters all the time. And this was one of my characters I made up. And he would battle these giant mutated, it's kind of like Ninja Turtles kind of thing, but they're rabbits. And he was a hare hunter. And he had these episodes and scenarios of battling these, very dictatorship rabbits. And I used to make these little mini comics that I would put into the school newspaper. This is the original pencil. I was very much into like Hong Kong and martial arts and Shaolin sort of movies as well too, because that was a peak, right? From like 1993 to the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, Hong Kong cinema, especially with people like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, Donnie Yen, they were the big stars. Sammo Hung, obviously, Yuen Biao. They were just pumping out movies. So for me, I was a huge fan of Hong Kong action. Back then, we could only rent it from Korean video shops. So my mom had a salon. She cut hair, so she had her own salon shop. And next door was a Korean video store. So we would go there and rent the newest Hong Kong, movies, but they're all subtitled in Korean. So I had no idea what the hell was going on, but I would love the fight scenes. This was probably 1998, 99 also. Pencil inking. I messed up on the mouth and I did a whiteout and I redrew it. This was inspired by old, kind of traditional Chinese paintings, like the crane and the vegetation and whatnot. Same character. I just made it up. Notice I didn't like drawing feet. Didn't like drawing feet. This is just me making up the character. I think this is the original. Yeah, it's the original. Do I speak any Asian languages? I speak Korean fairly okay. More really child level, honestly. I can understand it all right. I can actually read it. I remember the actual, sort of characters and stuff like this. So Korean, if I honestly spent like 3 months just practicing Korean with like I don't know, maybe even like an instructor or something like that, I bet you I could be pretty good on a level of great sort of conversationalist. But right now it's very broken. I just like looking at this old stuff. This was with some kind of brush pen. No, I'm sure maybe it was a marker. Kind of interesting how smooth it is. I don't really see a lot of strokes. These tiny little lines, this would have been with a repeatograph. So I was a huge fan of repeatographs at the time. I don't recommend repeatographs to draw with. But at the time, I thought that's all artists use. And they were a pain in the butt to clean. Would I recommend projects passion first? Would you recommend project passion first approach learning and supplementing with fundamentals rather than the other way around. I mean, no, I mean, honestly, it's more based on interest level again, because you should integrate both at the same time, no matter what the order is. So whether you start with the fundamental base stuff first and go into the project building or vice versa, you're going to end up in the same route, honestly. But if you cut out one or the other, then you might have a much more kind of like imbalanced experience, in my opinion. But I think your approach there will be fine. Oh yeah, I would say the art styles changed quite dramatically. I was a fan of the Savage Dragon. This is Eric Larson, but this one I was doing in a style in a very specific way. You might say Mignola, but it was actually something else. It is first inspired by my natural interest of Joe Mad. So there's Joe Mad hands in there. Um, this was something else I was looking at. The artist I don't know the name of, but it was a comic that came out in the late 90s. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember the name of the comic, honestly. I did a fan art piece for it, but it's not in here. Um, but yeah, it's not Mignola inspired. It was another artist that did this really heavy, like black and white. This is a photocopy. So this is the original line, and I photocopied it because I liked it, and then I watercolored it. I remember that. This is a watercolor. This is inspired by Capcom, obviously. 1998. So I was probably 18 at this time. All the shape design, Capcom inspired. You know, I was in Tokyo in December to January, and I went to that exhibition, the Capcom exhibition in Tokyo. Man, that thing was amazing. It's probably one of the best exhibitions I've seen in Japan because it literally had all those originals from the Capcom concept art to production art and marketing art, paintings of covers, Warzord to Street Fighter to Breath of the Fire, and it was just an amazing collection of originals. What do I think is a good way to build up visual library? Drawing from observation is the main key thing we say, right? Then repetition, breaking down to its most simplistic nature. That is what dynamic sketching, what my class is about. That's what we generally do to build visual library. This is a part of visual library also, visual library based on style set. So by consuming and studying other people's art, you are consuming their styling and building up a library of their language. And so as I myself, as the artist, start to curate multiple people, I begin to hybrid, put twists on things, make it my version. You can still see the DNA of those other inspirations and styles, but it's still my take on things because I'm using it for something on my own creation. I know of Darksiders, I never played it, but Joe Mad is the guy who owns that game company and also art directed and designed a lot of that stuff for the original Darksiders. But yeah, he was the artist I'm talking about, or he is the artist I'm talking about. I was messing around with different forms of media for sure, but mostly traditional. We did play with digital in 1999 because Photoshop was around at the time, and there was like a version of Photoshop before CS, and we did have a tablet, a drawing tablet, but that thing was like the first gen Wacom. The thing was the size of a table. It was massive, but we would check it out at the library in high school, me and my friend Izzy, and we just play around with it. So I used to do very early digital sort of like paintings based on like characters I would make. But this is in the late 90s. And I didn't really touch it too much. When I did a lot more digital stuff into like the 2000, 2001, but more for graphic design. Because I went to a 2-year college after high school for graphic design. And then from there, Art Center introduced more back into Photoshop, digital painting. But the first 2 years of Art Center was primarily traditional. This is 1997, 16. I thought this was later. Oh, man. Now, this is the same time when I was doing these characters. So this is my snow leopard. So I did a tiger, I did a lion, I did a king tiger later on, and this is my snow leopard version. I didn't paint this one. Again, I had no concept of like perspective and alignment and stuff like that, so you can see how everything is really wonky. I don't know why I tried like something of a cell shade kind of thing. I think I was just kind of curious about how that kind of worked. I literally took, some of you might remember, oh my gosh, this thing like changed color. Holy crap. This used to be clear, but now it's like orange. It changed color on me. Anyways, this is not an actual cell shade sort of like piece. This was from, when you're in school and you go to, let's say, like your math class, and the instructor would show you notes, right? And some instructors would do it on a chalkboard, and some people would on a whiteboard. But a lot of times back then, we had a projector, right? We had a light projector that would put it onto the screen. So we would be called up to do things like, mathematical equations, or we try to like problem solve them in front of the people, which is always nerve wracking. And we used to use these plastic sheets. So I remember I took some of these and said, oh, it'd be kind of fun to like, do a cell shade on. And I remember that you can actually take these and photocopy a drawing and photocopy it onto the actual plastic. So the line work on here is actually not ink. This is actually a photocopy. But I didn't understand how cell shading worked at the time. So, what I was supposed to do was paint underneath it, but I painted on top of it. And then I stopped at some point. I think I gave up because I felt like it was too hard. But I kept it. Man, this thing is weird to look at. So that was in high school. I didn't realize it was a different color because on a black background. Here's that old logo stuff I used to make for a company. This one was in Oregon still. Here's a photocopy of that Darth Maul piece. This is 2000, a little later. Another Hair Hunter. This is 1999. So this is the kind of stuff I used to love producing also. And this is inspired by the Capcom kind of work, where doing these sort of like big collages. You take all your characters and you collage them together. It's like a marketing piece of art, be used for like posters or prints or covers or something like this. And I was a big fan of looking at that kind of, illustration work. So I would try to generate my own with characters that I had. But this is 19 years old. All pencil work. Dragon Ball inspired too, you can tell by this hair. Yeah, well, this Star Wars, because Darth Maul came out with the Phantom Menace at the time, which I saw in the theater, and I thought he was the coolest character. The movie was still, the movie wasn't well received at the time either, but everyone loved Darth Maul. Still, I guess, does today to some degree. I know this one's been sprayed, so it's like protected a little bit. Did I practice drawing more realistic styles? I mean, kind of. If you look at stuff like this, again, you would consider being more realistic as anatomy, right? But it's still based on someone else's sketches and drawings. But in terms of stuff that I would make up, I mean, I guess you call that a bit more realistic proportion, but it's still very graphic and comic bookish. There's ranges of it. But I would always consider my look back then to be much more comic inspired, right? Because that's what I wanted to do. When I was a teenager, I wanted to make comic books. Mech design. This was inspired by Joe Matt also, the Battle Chasers mech. I think that's everything. Yeah, old stuff. So anyways, for those who haven't been sticking around for the whole time, what we've been kind of going through was basically a collection of decades old work from the age of 16 to 19. Now at the age of 43, things have progressed, I would hope, to a degree, and things feel different today than it was back then. But man, I still like looking at this old work at times because I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty nice. And the thing about this is that, the work that I produce today still, I mean, honestly, is it really that much different than what I'm even doing back then? There's some things that have remained, to be honest with you. There's something that still kind of have, obviously, right? Because it was still me doing this 25 plus years ago. But there are still going to be things inside this that are going to carry over and still exist today. If you looked at my work currently through like social media, I bet you'd be able to like decipher it and be like, oh man, that stuff over here look like kind of the stuff what you're doing now, and of course, subject matter wise, a lot of the stuff I used to draw back then, the characters and creatures and anatomy stuff is still very much the stuff I like to draw now. So of course, the translation of this old stuff is going to carry over, right? I'm still the same kid artist today as I was back then. We are going to draw a little bit. It's been about an hour and 20 minutes. We'll probably just hang out about another, 45, maybe an hour at the most. 3:30 my time. So, did I draw more back then than I do now? Interesting question. I would say it's a yes and no, because I would say I still draw as much now as I did back then. However, the difference is I would say I used to draw more for myself back then. Today, I still draw for myself, but a lot of the things that I draw now are more for demos for other people, right? Classrooms and stuff like this. So the opportunity to sit and draw for myself still exists. You know, whenever I do these live streams, or I will even just sit and draw for myself at times. But what is it to the same degree of level as back then? I mean, I used to draw endlessly when I was a teenager. Any opportunity that I had, any minute that I had, I was drawing all the time. And this is not even when I was a teenager. I'm talking about when I started at the age of, like, you know, as a toddler, from the age of 5 up to 10. Once I got to like the age of 10, it was much more serious. At the age of 5, I was just doodling stuff with crayons, you know, as most of us do. Um, but definitely a lot more sort of like time probably was spent for myself at that age, younger age. Would I change that today? Like, would I want to do more for myself? I think I do enough for myself where I still feel very satisfactory of it. And also in the fact that it kind of scratches that itch, you know, in terms of the level of like obsession I still had at the time. It's still there for sure. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna sketch a little bit, and what I'm gonna also adjust is the camera. I am gonna bring it back up. So I apologize because the only thing I can't do with the phone is easily, and I guess I could zoom in with it with my fingers, but I'm just gonna bring the camera closer to it in general. Sorry. There we go. Repeat question here is, how would you recommend to cross hatch organic shapes like along the surface and contours in some other way? Unfortunately, with a question like that requires demos, which we are not going to be able to do. The best situation in that case is to be able to look at resources like books, maybe go through some classes, but are there specific sort of like, you know, techniques in which you could do to hatch with organic shapes? Absolutely. If I could say it by verbal word, it would just be to go along with the contour. As you had stated, you kind of answered your own question. So that's literally what we do in our classes. Somebody asked, like, should I recreate maybe one of my old sketches? I'm happy to do that if you guys are interested in seeing that. I don't want to use a known character though. I would rather use a thing that I drew that was kind of like my own idea. Something, you know, this kind of thing is really fun, like the Tarzan stuff. Maybe even like a character like this one here, battling some kind of like mythological creature. I could maybe even go to one of the ones in my portfolio. If this is something you'd be interested in seeing, that's something I don't mind doing. Question here is, what would you say were the main contributors to actually advancing art-wise? Time, interest, not schools, and I mean, yeah, granted, those variables helped, right? The Hare Hunter. I have not drawn that character since I was a teenager. So sure, that sounds fun. I'm not even gonna look at the images because I basically remember what he was. And we'll draw him. What will we draw? Well, I don't know just yet, but let me just kind of visualize and answer the questions as best I can. Hare Hunter would be interesting. I remember he used to drive a tank. He was a solo character, and he would fight those giant rabbits. So the tank, I'm going to leave out. I just want to draw him as a character. Maybe him possibly in some form of engagement with the rabbit characters would be kind of fun. Maybe one of them, battling with them maybe. Firing his gun, obviously, is one way to do it. Let's see. Usually in this situation, when I'm presented with an idea, do I go through in my head several different visuals? Usually I do, but it's never static. You know, it's not like a singular image in my head. It's almost like a movie. I'm able to play with it in through like motions and movement, you know. And apologies, I may have also like stopped answering that question briefly, but yeah. So the question about the contour and hatching, you know, those answers, what you gave yourself, is pretty much what we typically do in the class. The main contributors of art was time, interest, not necessarily those like schoolings and that sort of stuff. Those things help, obviously, in terms of the advancements within sort of traditional fundamental means. But really, the only thing that kept me into it was just simply the level of interest and obsession I had from creating, you know? And that comes from the inside. You got to kind of develop that as a natural sort of rhythmic habit from day-to-day action, which is time, right? How do I think about placing characters in a scene? So in this case, There's no scene of a location per se I'm thinking about. I'm thinking more about the action, about what the character will do. So I'm going to use a combination of words first. Wording to help me give a visual to this as an idea. It's just an idea that I want, right? I'm not looking for a specific image in my head right now to figure out like what's the composition and what's this pose going to be. I'm not thinking about that stuff at all. I'm thinking of the idea as to what is actually happening. And so the idea I said earlier was, well, maybe he's fighting this, rabbit character, or maybe there's a rabbit kind of like mech thing that's being controlled by them, whatever the case is, and he's running from it, right? Maybe he's hiding from it. Who knows? So those are just various ideas I'm using, and right now I'm using only words. That's all I can do. I'm not looking at images. I'm not looking at references. Nothing around me, and we literally just chose what we're going to do right now. This piece of paper is something that's a little bit more watercolorish. It's a bit bigger in space, so I have plenty of space to work with. I have the Faber-Castell. This is a Pitt pen. I'm using the S sizing. This is a 0.3. I do have the XS. The only reason why I have these is because they were just available. So they're on my table and I just grabbed them. These ones that we primarily use in our art classes, drawing, dynamic sketching, those methods of exercise, but I don't mind using it for daily drawing as well too. However, now that I've kind of played with that kind of wordage in terms of what I'd like to maybe do, what I will go for, there's two ways to approach it. It's either going to be much more literal, meaning the idea that I just stated is an actual functional action, or I go more abstract, meaning I can just play with the visuals any way I want to. I can, add things, more stuff. I don't usually do that kind of thing all the time. Hunter having a tea with the rabbit, that could be an interesting visual. So do you imagine the action and then put it into words, or do you build a sentence of action and imagine the scene based off of that? Both. So it can be first a visual image in my mind based on memory. I've seen this movie, I've seen this image, I've seen this illustration, and based on that, my brain's feeding me that visual. And then as I play with those ideas, I don't settle upon them. And then think about the kind of words that are attached to them, right? Based on what's actually happening within the scene. Not like a adjective of like, it's dynamic or it's flashy or it's energetic. Those words are not really being used right now. It's more of a direct description of an idea, like what's literally happening, right? So, like the hunter having tea. Okay, that's an interesting idea. And I would build off of that now. Okay, so can I see an image of that in my mind? Yes, but what is that image of? An image of something I've seen before. Is it something I've seen of something other artists have done? A lot of times right now for me, it goes in something that I've done. So what have I done in the past of a similar scene? Well, if you've never done it, you won't have the image. So then you'll turn to something that you may have seen from something else, a movie, an illustration, another artist's work, right? So I'm going to build off of this. The hunter having tea with the rabbit. But instead of that, we're going to alter it. What if the hunter is sitting on a defeated, some kind of rabbit mechanical villain character, and he's sitting on top of him drinking something? It could be tea. And we can maybe even do that, right? He's like drinking tea, sipping on it, something like this. So that's the idea. Do I have a visual? Kind of. Now the visual is very misty. It's partitioned. I said the villain first on the ground, crumpled up, defeated. It wasn't very clear, but I had this idea that he was obviously, face down and on the ground. That's as much as I really got. In terms of the hunter sitting on top of there, the only thing I thought about was his sitting position. But the image was very ghostly. Okay, so it phases in and out. And a lot of times there are things missing. Like I didn't see his head. All I saw was like his lower appendages. Like what was his legs doing? And then I think about what was his arms doing? But it's never a complete image, because then I never thought about what was happening below. It's very focused to things that I'm thinking about specifically. And then what I do is I take all those pieces, okay? And right here on the spot, I collage it together. Now it sounds very difficult to do something like this, and it can be for sure. Where do I even begin? And that's the thing about this, is that it actually doesn't really matter where I begin in this case. I can start with, let's say, his arm coming down this direction. Again, I'll start making choices on the spot now, because I'll now go to the idea like, well, what is his arms doing? Is he resting on his knee? Well, if he's sipping tea out of a cup, I'm going to have one arm maybe hold the saucer and the other arm hold, the teacup. Simple form is based on, when we do exercises. And yes, you can do that here. If you're creating your own illustration right now, you're creating a bunch of forms, thumbnail, underlay sketch, whatever the process is, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But right now, what I'm going to do is go straight in. Why am I going straight in and not doing an underlay? Because I like to. It's just a personal preference. It doesn't mean it's better. It doesn't mean it's the right way. It just means it's just a way I like to do things. Um, so Pixar is saying sometimes when you talk about drawing, I get the feeling you're talking about as if it was a sport. Absolutely. I use the analogy of sport and physical exercise very similarly to what I do with art in a lot of times. So then once you have the idea, do you move to simple forms like boxes and cylinders? Again, as I mentioned, that is something you can do. In your guys' work and process, pull out a piece of paper, sketch it out roughly. Doesn't matter how it looks. You're trying to understand something, right? When you understand it, you figure out the composition, the posing, the shapes and the forms, the placement. You transfer it to this piece. You might do a pencil. You might ink it. Nothing wrong with that. You might use references and photographs. By all means, do it. But I'm going to bypass it. And the reason why, again, is because this is the shortest path of resistance for me, right? I could do thumbnail. I could do process of forms and shapes, but I don't need to. Why? Because I've been doing this for over 25 goddamn years. So some things I've been able to edit out in terms of like, I don't need this. I don't need that. Let's just go draw. So let's have him. I don't want him being dainty with the cups. I want him to look as if he's been a little bit beat up. So I want him slightly hunched over. So what I'll do is I'm going to ghost my motions. The ghosting of the motions helps me visualize where things are. This movement here is his general gesture. Not a gestural line, but a gestural movement of his pose of where he's leaning. His legs are going to come up this direction over here. The body of the other villain character is down over here. Me ghosting this allows me to visually understand the scale and the position of the drawing. So I know I'm not going to go off of the page. I'm not going to go off of the page. I have enough space to work within. This ghosting maneuver allows me to visualize the image without having a direct, actual static image in my head. But onto the page, I can generally see where I would place stuff. I can see where they can go. Initially, the movements right now are him facing to the left. I'm going to flip that. I want him facing to the right. Why? Because I always draw a character facing to the left. So I'm going to flip it because I want to alter what I normally do and do something else. So I'm going to have him facing this direction. So let's have him, I'm going to put the shoulders here. And let me just mark it a couple of times because the pen has been uncapped. So I need to let it flow ink. This is where we slow down. And this may completely fail. The drawing might be terrible. There's always a chance of that. But that fear, as someone we talked about earlier, as it exists and I acknowledge it, doesn't hamper my experience because I still enjoy and I love drawing. So what I'm going to do is just first establish a couple things just to get a feel of it. He's obviously the very sort of typical comic book muscular character at the time when I was growing up. And we're trying to keep faithfulness to the character that I had. So usually imagined characters that I have these days, I don't really go with this typical sort of like overly muscular characters anymore. The only time that you'll see me do that is when the character already exists. Some of you who follow me on social media, maybe you saw that with that Street Fighter Ryu character. He was obviously overtly muscular. But these days, I don't really like drawing characters that are like Arnold Schwarzenegger level kind of stuff, bodybuilder kind of muscular kind of thing. I try to go more of a natural sort of body proportioning and build these days. And if they are, developed, it's something still within a range that might be somewhat more natural to a degree. But that's just, again, personal preference. I'm going to go back to the chat real fast. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So how intentional am I when it comes to these marks? That's something I'm very conscious of right now. That these lines, I want them to be purposeful. But here's a better way to put it. I'm trying to be more conscious of what lines I don't put down. It's very easy for me to draw everything, every detail, every shadow shape, every anatomical muscular detail within this. I can go into it. But the choice of what I don't want to include is the harder one. And the one that I think usually ends up making the piece a lot stronger. Because leaving it up for the viewer to look at, but also just the idea of being able to balance the design of the image, where there's information, where there's a lack of information. So some things can be preemptive of like a conscious choice. Some things are sort of like, I guess, a part of a habit in a way where you start to design things in a certain manner and it comes out in that nature. Other parts are, in the moment. You just see it, you feel it, and it kind of goes out that way. And the thing about also this is that a lot of the wordplay, a lot of things I try to decide upon what the image looks like, I'm not beholden to them. I'm not locked to it. Just because I said that stuff and just because I said, oh, that could be the image, doesn't mean I have to actually draw that. The thing about what we're doing right now is that I'm just drawing for fun. This isn't for something. This isn't for somebody. This is for me. So because of that, I don't have to necessarily follow, the exactness of the details to the idea to the, posing or compositions. I can on the fly change this. Well, I said, oh, he's sitting on top of some villain character drinking tea. And I said a couple additional things from there. Something I even just forgot. It's like, what we're doing again? It's like, I'm just drawing, you know? Uh, it's just for fun. It doesn't matter that much. Give yourself that sort of openness of allowance to create. It doesn't have to be so serious, especially in these sort of moments. I understand when it comes to like training or you're applying to some sort of like, monetary thing, some from a job. There's these standards of approach and methods of techniques and things that we have to comply to. But when it comes to just drawing, sketching, creating, I think honestly, a lot of that stuff really just goes out the window. you know, you don't have to follow that. It doesn't have to be perfect this or proper that. You just do it because that's an interesting idea, or that's an interesting visual, or I kind of want to try it this way, or that was a really cool inspiration. You want to do that. Sorry, some of the questions again I missed. This one's interesting. When I spent all my time studying to draw from imagination, never had any problem with motivation progressing, but have been wondering if I should work on creating my own illustrations. Yeah. If you've been practicing on drawing from the imagination most of your time, and you have no other issues when it comes to your drive and your state of interest to create, should you create your own illustrations? Absolutely. Why not? What's stopping you? So Grim is, mentioning this idea that you're so focused on this idea of gain, trying to build up your skill set and trying to match up the things that you see out there. And obviously, there's, legitimacy to that, and in the sense that we all need to improve as we're trying to get somewhere when it comes to these sort of skills. And yeah, granted, there are some people that are more interested in this as a hobby, and it's not really trying to be a career based thing. But at the same time, we all start with the idea of going pencil, pen, whatever material to paper because we find that action to just be very, very interesting. And because the interest is so peaking in our minds, we can't help but not just think about it day to day. We want to do more of it. It's like, oh, I had this idea or had that idea. And the drive of wanting to see the outcome of that um, becomes so insatiable that then we then start to systemize it. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I can learn this technique, or I can maybe find ways to speed up, or I'm trying to build visual vocabulary, or I'm trying to learn anatomy. Like all the questions we've been getting today have been based on this idea of how do I progress my skills to become something, right? And as important as that stuff is, that yeah, we all have to find some ways to maybe make a living off of this, or is it something that is our future, and We're trying to find proper ways of approach and not trying to find ways of wasting our time too much. And you want a very valid, recognizable, and standard approach. But again, we can so easily lose our sense of direction of how we started this in the first place and why we started it. It was just something that we just love to do. Um, and as people are getting so afraid of things like the AI stuff and different technologies coming out and being afraid of their jobs being taken, and those are actual things that are going on, but why would that stop you from creating? Why would that stop you from just wanting to draw or sculpt or take photographs or dance or sing or whatever you do creatively? And I think people are saying that because it takes the creative forces out of me. It's like, why bother now? It's like, why should I even create anyways? Because AI is there anyways. Well, that's the whole reason why you should do it more. Um, so if you're just using that excuse to be like, well, I don't want to touch this anymore because I feel bad about it. And like, well, this is supposed to make you feel good. So if it makes you feel good, do more. But if it doesn't make you feel good, you got to rediscover it. Because ever since I was a child, this is all I did because it only made me feel really happy. And that hasn't changed in over 3 decades, right? So I'm going to scroll up a little bit, see some of the questions. Um, Weird question maybe, but do you know about the Challenge 52? I have no idea what that is. Sorry. You guys can maybe answer for me, but I have no idea what that is. What was the job you enjoyed the most besides the Coca-Cola ad that I did? Um, I'm trying to think. Besides, that advertisement was so much fun because it was so open for me to do whatever I want and just to sketch and draw. Recently, in the last number of years, a lot of the projects that I work on are so open-ended in terms of blue sky effect, where they just give me like a script or a project idea and say, just give us your take. Those are really fun projects. So it's no much so much based on like the specific project per se anymore, but it's more based on the kinds of projects I get to work on, which is this open format of, hey, go explore. Use your sketching, give us your best ideas. That's awesome. So most of the projects we're working on in the last 5 years have been that, whether it's like a show animation, whether it's like a design for a game. Um, Probably the most recent one was that Love, Death, and Robots animation, where they just gave me the script and said, "Hey, design one of the characters of the cats. Just give us your take." You know, it was great. Got to work with the director. She told me what she liked and didn't like, and kind of gave her some ideas. And it was about maybe a week or two worth project, and it was fun. Granted, a lot of that stuff doesn't end up being like in post or end up in design finality a lot of times because it's so early in sort of pre-concept, pre-production phase that usually it's a lot of like internal use for just purely inspiration. The artist's take on something. Okay, now take that now produce into an actual legitimate design, is what they would do. Tiny teacup. I'm gonna put his other arm extending out that direction, holding the saucer in the dish on the tip of his hand. Talking through your drawings actually is a really good recommendation, by the way. Just kind of talk through it because it's not talking about, oh, I'm putting my line here. I want to put my line there. I'm talking about the actual subject and what's going on. I kind of see him doing this or feeling that way. Maybe he's holding a saucer in this direction. How would I hold a saucer? How would I hold a cup? This sort of, using words, talking through can generate then ideas. He used to do that a lot too. What was Kim Jong-gi? Jong-gi would always talk when he would draw. Because that's how he would make up like these really weird, crazy ideas. Like, oh, what if it's doing this? And what if I add that? And he would do it. You know, I don't know a lot of other artists that do this. I I myself like to do it, like talking through things. It's something I just naturally always kind of did. But a lot of my friends or people that I know that would draw a lot, I don't remember them doing that often. Excuse me. So I'm gonna scroll down to the chat. Apologies. Where do you recommend someone should start learning how to draw? I mean, there's no place you go to. You start in your room. In terms of if you're asking what should you start, using to draw, and that could be various things like materials, subject matter, or techniques. Don't worry about that so much. Just look around you. What do you have? Do you have a pencil? Doesn't matter the brand. Doesn't matter how much it costs. I don't care if it was free. Do you have paper? Is it printer paper? Is it high quality paper? Doesn't matter. As a beginner, these sort of things won't really alter your experience that much. They just won't, especially materials. And then even in technique, you can say, well, what technique should I start with? Should I learn like the Loomis technique, or should I learn from these classical masters, or should I learn from like YouTube and Proco, or it doesn't matter. None of that stuff will make a difference right now. And the reason why is because as a beginner, you don't know how to utilize them. You don't even really fully understand them. You can copy them, but you don't understand how to use it, you know? So I'm not saying there's no point watching or using or learning those things or trying to experience them based on curiosity. But if you're concerned about how do I just start, none of those factors should really make a decision based on like how you just begin. You begin because it's interesting. What do you like? What do you find interesting? Do you find humans interesting? Do you find animals interesting? Do you find landscapes interesting? And then if you think about, well, I can't draw them very well, that doesn't matter either. Nobody draws those things very well in the beginning. But it's the idea of curiosity that I find this stuff to be so fascinating in the world around us. I want to capture it somehow. Then you just start, regardless of quality, regardless of materials, regardless of technique. It's just you and this. That's it. And that's how I started. My parents, they gave me no direction. They had no idea what I was supposed to do. They're immigrants coming from Korea back in the 70s. They have no idea how to train in art. They didn't do art. I had no family friends that did art. I had an uncle that did a little bit. He showed me literally one thing in my youth, and that was it. Um, I ate it up, but at the same time, there was nothing else. I had instructors that were artists, but there are art teachers in public high schools and public junior high or public grade school, and they're just public teachers, and they have a certain amount of information, but again, they have countless other students they got to work with. In that situation, none of that stuff matters. You just begin because you just enjoy it. Draw circles if you want to. you know, just draw shapes. And if you're thinking, I have to draw this like masterpiece, and of course I know you're probably not thinking that, but you might feel that way. So to let that part go, I'm not saying it's very easy either, because your brain is telling you one thing. You want something very specific, you know. I'm trying to make a decision of whether I want to put his goggles on his eyes or if I'm going to lift his goggles above his head. I have never drawn this character with his goggles off, like not on his eyes. You have to keep in mind that this character, the last time I drew him is when I was 18 years old. Okay, so when I say that I don't distinctly remember ever drawing this character without goggles on, that's just from as far as I can remember. He's just having afternoon tea after a battle and fight. I want a face of content. I want this light to come inwardly towards us. And the level of detail will be more minimal. I have no idea what's going to happen down here yet. I haven't thought about it. I don't care. We'll make it up as we go later. He used to have these really giant boots. Some kind of clasp system. I always used to create all these like buckles and straps for God knows what reason. This is the 90s, okay? We used to have pouches and buckles everywhere on characters. So Mika was asking you whether you should start with dynamic sketching or challenge 52. Again, I have no idea what challenge 52 is. If you find it interesting, if it seems beneficial, by all means, go for it. The thing about when it comes to like educational experiences of interest of whatever you're finding, here's the best way to kind of consider it. At some point, you're most likely going to experience all of it, right? So, hey, should I do challenge 52 or should I do dynamic sketching? Doesn't matter. I bet you you'll do both at some point. So the idea is to begin. Just choose now what's the most interesting to you. Maybe challenge 52 is very trendy right now. It's like, okay, go for it. If it's trendy, if it's something that's really popular and something you find very, very interesting, by all means, go for that, you know? But if you're thinking like, what's the right way? In this situation, in the foundations early on, there is no right way. The best way is to just begin. When you were young, who did you show your artwork to for critiques and advice, but also praise? When I was a kid, my parents. I would say, "Hell, look what I drew," and they said, "Well, that's great," and they had no idea what the hell I'm drawing. Um, I remember this one comment my mom used to made, and I still was kind of like, I could kind of put my hands to my chest, like, "Oh, how could you say that to me?" you know, and I showed her a drawing of a Dragon Ball character. I was just a kid, and then she said, like, "Oh, why aren't you that muscular?" I don't know why I like was shocked at them. Was like, "Why am I not that muscular?" Um, as a person, I don't know why, but that popped up in the memory. Let's put let's put the goggles on. Just putting the goggles on. Ever play Hades? Nope. Hades 2? Nope. Do I know of it? Yes. Will I play it? I have no idea. I'm playing Demon Souls right now. Thanks for the comment and recommendation, Grim. Appreciate that sort of support. Before is asked or saying, been doing serious practice for a month now. What should really be your primary focus when doing skull studies? When is it time to move on from them and start studying on real faces? Right now. If you have that question of asking me of when you should move on to go from skull studies to real faces, that means you do it now because you have that question. If you didn't ask that question and you were still unsure about what to do with the skull, you stay with the skull. But as soon as you have interest in like drawing real faces, you've been doing some skulls, move on. It doesn't mean you stop drawing skulls. You integrate the study of heads. I don't know if she meant to this joke. So that's why as a kid, it's like, oh my gosh, I was taken aback a little bit. It was a joke, obviously. But I remember as a memory, I was just a child, like, how come I don't look like that then? you know? As a kid, the weirdest thing is sticking in your brain for long-term memory. So I'm scrolling through some of the chat right now. Apologies. Any Korean only streams? I have no idea. I'm I'm Korean by ethnicity, but not Korean by nationality. So if you're looking for Korean streams of language, that's not gonna be me. Do I know James Heron? I know the artist. I've seen his work. His stuff is freaking amazing. But he's part of that group, I think. Those guys at Felix Comics. So guys like Daniel Warren Johnson and a few others that are part of that team. And I think James Heron's a part of them. But yeah, they do some crazy stuff. Super dynamic, high energy, crazy proportions and shapes. Tons of fun. This definitely takes me back to like how drawings were just fun, just fun again. I love their stuff. Did I do anything before when you felt like you're gaining little progress? I never paid attention to that honestly as a kid. I never felt like, oh, I'm not gaining enough yet. I think the only time in which I felt that way is when I was surrounded by a lot of other artists, usually my classmates, and that's in college years. But before college, like in high school, It was just me and my friend. So I never really thought about like, was I progressing fast enough? Not until later in my 20s, I began to be more aware of that. And then I would be a little bit more kind of concerned or anxious and trying to push more. But it's because there was so much more competition. Competition, I think, is a very sort of, I can say it's maybe a touchy subject in conversation. Let's say in art, some people would say competition is very good, whether it's like in art or sport or any sort of skill based thing, right? And some people say competition is the ruiner in your experience of things, and you need more support and much more encouragement and a better sort of like, platform foundation in your skills. I would say I wouldn't know the proper right or wrong way. I do know that experiencing in all those variables I think are good. Competition for sure as well. Um, I did enjoy it, but I would say that competition also put me into those mindsets where I was much more self-conscious and more nervous about my future and not being good enough, especially being surrounded by friends that I thought were so much better than me. And it created a lot of like, stress at times. Um, but so I think if it's imbalanced where all you're experiencing is that, very much so, I think it can develop a mentality or a mindset into the future where the work you would generate, no matter what it was, it would never feel good or satisfactory, or you would never be happy with it. So I was able to recognize that. And it's not to say that, you know, I was able to somehow break that mentality or something like this. It's just over time you start to recognize it, Maturity just generally happens. Um, but at the time of my 20s, that's all you're kind of like, that's all you know. So for sure, I would say that I was conscious of it, aware of it, and affected by it to a degree. But today, it's like, I don't really feel that at all. I'm surrounded by amazing artists that are far better than me, and I revel in that. I enjoy it much more. Beforehand, I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I should be working harder to catch up. But it's more the reality that that's never even going to be you. It's more about finding yourself, right? Um, so I think it still is beneficial to go through that sort of heavy kind of competition-based things, but it's in phases. It can't be since you're young all the way into your current age. It can't be 24/7. It'll ruin you. But at the same time, the absence of competition it doesn't help you understand where you're placed in general, but also help you identify yourself more. That kind of environment of stress and strain is necessary to a degree. It's just life. Um, but I think there is a balance that is required. We'll come back to his head later on. Let's move down a little bit further. Let's go down to the rest of this thing. Let me just make sure of my time also, because I can't go past a certain amount of time because I have class at a certain point. So I might have to end this in about 15, 20 minutes. We'll get far enough. You know what? Let's just finish up his head. He had this like crazy Dragon Ball inspired hair. It was kind of like Vegeta, the spiky hair like this. And he had a mullet because he had a long ponytail. Will I come to the Hong Kong Comic Con? No idea, because I haven't done any sort of like Asia Comic Cons at all. I've done a festival in Korea, Seoul, a couple years ago, but Comic Cons I haven't really done before. Do I know Paul Bonner? I do not. Sorry. Would I like to come to the Hong Kong Comic Con? Absolutely. Why not? I would just like to go to Hong Kong just in general. I know, granted, it's not the same Hong Kong as it was back in the 90s, from what I understand. But to travel to like Asia, China, Hong Kong, anywhere, I would love to. By the way, just because I'm drawing this character, I'm not planning to bring this character back. It's an old idea IP that I had as a kid and as a teenager, and it was a fun idea, but nothing that really kind of remotely interests me anymore in developing it. So, drawing it to me was not something in my bingo card in this year. Um, Again, I haven't drawn this character in over 2 decades, so the Dynamic Bible. Thank you for the donation there. It will plan to come out this year. So the second one is planned for this year in summer. I'm trying to wrap it up this coming month in terms of the finalities of the page of the drawings and the page book designs. But that'll be hopefully somewhere in July. That's the second one's coming out. Is there a plan for a third one? I had plans for up to 5 volumes. So that's still the plan. The third volume will be a continuation of dynamic sketching, which is like the third section. But after that, the rest of the dynamic Bibles will go into different sort of areas of techniques as well. I may do one on things like watercolor. I might do things on even a design one. Um, so it may encompass other areas of focus of technique beyond than just dynamic sketching. It builds off of it, obviously. So it still has to be connected to some degree level. Or it might be like imagination sketching, creating out of imagination. So what those books will be, I have no idea just yet. Will it actually happen? Sorry, I have no idea. That's the intention, but it may not actually happen. Hopefully it does. I mean, I have interest in doing it still, but there's a lot of other books I still want to make as well too. Art books I want to make, sketchbooks, storybooks. I still want to make my comic, my continuation of the blacksmith. All right, so let's have him sitting on the chest. I want there to be deformation, holes, bullet holes, broken up stuff, cracks, damage, maybe a little bit of smoke coming off of him. This will be some sort of cowl on the front chest area. And his feet will be on the head. This will be like wires and mechanics underneath. This will be the side plane, so I'm going to have the head pointing this direction. We'll put these mechanical ears because it's rabbit inspired. Like that way. Shoulder armor. And the arms over here will be spread out, but this will just be a silhouette of the arm. This arm will show a little bit more detail. Obviously, answering questions and stuff like that delays my process a little bit. So I will go back to some of the questions here, but normally if I just kind of draw, usually it tends to go a little bit quicker. So I'm just trying to establish as much of this I can. Back part of the leg, this is the thigh. Here's part of the calf coming down, silhouette shape. We'll put some bullet holes in its head as well. I used to love drawing little casings when I was in high school. Oh my gosh, I used to do these illustrations where there was a gunfight or something like that, and I would always draw like bullet casings flying all over the place and on the ground. I just found it very entertaining to do that. So I'm kind of scrolling back up to the chat real quickly. Have I ever been to South Africa? No, I have not. I have some friends who've been there. I Most of my travels have been to East Africa. So, I've been to Kenya several times, and there's talks of maybe going back this year, back to Kenya. I like going there for a lot of the wildlife, obviously. And there are students in Nairobi I've worked with and I still work with today. And the art industry in obviously Africa is a giant, country or continent, and the many countries within them, each of them have these different levels of, let's say, like art growth of industry itself, and probably Johan and South Africa probably has a decent, sort of community within that. I know some friends that lived in South Africa and worked in the industry and stuff like this, but in East Africa, there's a lot of local artists that are really trying to develop, their kind of community and culture of storytelling and industry. And some of the students I've worked with in the past number of years, they've really kind of like, I feel like achieved a certain amount of growth and maturity in their work, which has been great to observe. So I actually had a conversation with a few of them this year, and it's great to see where they were. So I'm hoping to go back to Kenya, to obviously go back because I enjoy being there and seeing and catching up with some of the students if I'm able to. But other than that, I would love to see South Africa at some point. I've always wanted to do shark diving on the tip down there in South Africa. I think you can do that also in Mexico, but I think South Africa is another place you can go down. Is it Cape Town? Maybe I'm remembering it wrong. But cage diving, not cave diving, cage diving with sharks. That'd be fun. Is there a schedule for enrollment period for my classes? Right now, the classes are in session, so the next time enrollment will happen won't be until early April. How many dynamic bubbles are there right now? Just one. The first one that came out. The second one will be out fully this year. And in terms of recommendations of learning watercolor, unfortunately, there's not a lot of books I can recommend. There's a lot of books out there, but not ones that I've kind of like observed or have gotten that I would say is probably the best one. In terms of color, probably, one of the artists I would really pay attention to is the artist that did Dinotopia. God damn it. What the hell? The name is on the tip of my tongue. I hate that feeling where it's like, it, but then it's like, it's not there. What was his name again? James Gurney. Dang it. That's it. James Gurney is the artist you might want to look at for books because he had that really great book, the Art of Color and Lighting or something like this. One that I probably will be, buying as one of the early ones. Sorry, I'm going to scroll down a little bit more further now. So if I apologize if I missed a question. You can ask again. We're going to be here for about another 10 minutes or so. Let me just wrap up a couple of the main elements here now. Look at his rest of his arm here. And then we'll just kind of fill in some details. Here we go. So that's relatively complete. Let's have a little bit more visual effects, smoke. Just debris, stuff that's kind of laying about, maybe from parts and pieces of the mech robot. This long, thin ear design comes from Shiro. It was kind of subconscious. It wasn't a conscious choice initially. I said rabbit, so I gave him ears. But as a mech design, the main inspiration from this would have been Bararius from Appleseed. But that's because that design sort of language has now been integrated into my visual language from my youth. Appleseed was one of my favorites. That manga is a great one. I would always turn to Battle Angel Alita, but Appleseed is very much up there, as with also Akira and Nausicaa. A lot of this stuff is just technological junk. Gears, wires, panel parts, stuff that doesn't actually functionally work in this case, but it's giving you the language of mechanics that gives you the illusionary effect of it. Screws and bolts, panel parts. I always loved the vents that Shiro would do. This is all silhouette. So we're just gonna leave this just with a few indications. I'm gonna go back to some of the questions. How often will I have the advanced sketching class? Right now we're in session at the moment with the advanced sketching. The next time it'll come back probably won't be until the end of this year. And if honestly, truthfully, it may not even be until the beginning of next year. So apologies, but the advanced class is only normally offered a few times, mainly because I build up sort of like the student body that goes through the normal dynamic sketching class that then moves into the advanced class. So the best thing to do would be to kind of move into the dynamic sketching regular version if you haven't done so already. If you have already at this point, the best thing to do obviously is to wait. And I wish I did, offer it every single session, but the problem is there's just not enough students, I would say, to fill up the kind of the quota to a degree level to sustain it. So giving it a little bit of a break in between helps build up the class interest. But I could be fooling myself. Maybe it'll be just fine if I offered it every single session. I have no idea. From my experience so far, classes that are a little bit more intermediate to some of the more I would call not really so much advanced, but the next stages usually work better if they're offered, a little bit at a time. Did I ever draw the character you play in a video game? You said earlier you were playing Demon Souls. Would you ever draw um, the character from that? So I haven't. I have drawn video game characters that exist, obviously within a story or a property, but in terms of like a character creation mode thing, I've never done that before. Never even came to mind. Would be interesting. I did have a notion or a feeling of like wanting to draw something from Demon Souls, not exactly from the game, but inspired by it, specifically more dark fantasy, so like giant zombie sort of like knights or something like that, and a soldier or a mage or something like this as well too. So again, the Dark Souls would have just only been like an idea of inspiration. It wouldn't have been the actual sort of like thing I would draw though. These days, things like fan art I'll do once in a while, but they're normally built off of nostalgia. Characters that I remember, characters I love doing. But modern day characters today, it's like I don't really do as much. I don't have as much connection to them. Oh, so okay. Someone's finally just describing challenge 52. So it's a sort of challenge with an exercise for every week of the year by a Thorough. He's an artist on YouTube. No idea. Uh, I brought it up because I recognize a few things in there that you I talk about. Interesting. I'll look it up. I'm always kind of curious as to what other people do educationally, not to really criticize and not to judge. It's just more of like, well, what are they doing to set up that helps people? You know. So it is always kind of fascinating to see how art education is being handled these days, and also for me as an instructor, as I talk about like other sources of educational value as students are taking my classes, I do like to at least be informed about what's currently going on. So I looked that up. Challenge 52. A thorough. Vagabond, I'm a huge fan of in terms of mangas. Berserk, I do like. Neither of them I've completed in terms of reading, which I do want to. But from what I understand, I hear Vagabond is kind of in a stasis. Uh, I believe Takehiko mentioned that he was a little bit afraid of finishing it or something or working on it because it was so personal. Did I ever pursue to be a comic artist at one point in my life? Yes, after high school, before I went to college. And then I gave that up because I was more interested in design for comics, or I'm sorry, design for games. Initially, it was actually animation, but then I didn't get it. So I went to games afterwards. Give it some panel lines. Well, we had a very healthy reception and number of people in here for our first live stream of 2026. Again, I thank you everyone here for joining in. We're not ending it just yet, but we will be ending it fairly soon. It's about 4:30 my time, and I do have to kind of sign off here momentarily, mainly because my classes start at 5. So give myself a half an hour break is probably going to be good. Maybe get something to snack on. But next time, I would like to, maintain this schedule if I can into the future. In the past, I had a hard time really trying to figure out like when I would do these sort of pop-up live streams. And it was most times were whenever I was free. Right now, my general schedule is that I do teach practically every day. So Mondays are my mentorships, and I also do like a little bit of private lessons for some individuals. Tuesday to Friday, I teach class a day. So one class a day. In the past, I used to teach, Thursdays back to back. So I would teach 2 classes in that day, and it would tire me out. But right now, I'm on a single class a day all the way to Friday. But Wednesdays today are the only days in which I have a class in the evening. So my entire mornings to afternoons are relatively free. Now, I do have a lot of other stuff I got to do. I actually have some freelance jobs coming up, and I have my dynamic Bible got to finish up as well too. But it is kind of like the best sort of scheduling at the moment because evening feeds are kind of nice, but late at night I usually go to the gym or something like this, spend some quality time. But, I think Wednesdays, I understand time zone wise, for some people it's kind of hard, but that's, I can only do so much. So I think what I might end up doing is sticking with this time of schedule. So you might be able to lean on this as an expectation, where Wednesday here, Pacific time afternoons, I may be doing live streams on YouTube. So will it be every week? We'll see. It can be more confidently stated as every other week, but I will attempt to do every week if possible. We'll probably end up staying with this for a little while, and we'll see if we maintain it. But for the time being, it's like I've been wanting to try to find a good moment of a time to maintain this YouTube channel, especially into the new year. So now that I'm kind of settled back in, all the travel kind of finished up, classes have begun. I've been on a break, just kind of, being on my own relaxing vacation, essentially, right? From December to January. But now that we're in February, it's like it's kind of get time to get back into the horse and start working again. So there's a lot of things I got to do, but and YouTube I consider as a part of that sort of like engagement and things I usually operate day to day. Obviously not day to day, but something within my sort of circle of stuff I kind of engage in. Either way, if anybody has any recommendations, any concerns, any thoughts, any questions, otherwise, please put them in the comments. And obviously, a subscribing would always be wanted. A like is always kind of nice. Spread the word, obviously. You could be Facebook if you still use it, and it could be Instagram. Sharing your guys' experiences and whatnot, because it's more than just watching something. I hope this kind of back and forth Q&A discussions of stuff and watching live streams and someone draw more live immediately, which, there are other opportunities to see this sort of stuff from other artists, but hopefully this sort of experience is giving you something a bit more in contrast to maybe some others. Will I be doing Lightbox in 2026? That is the plan. Actually, it's a good thing to kind of segue into before we finish up here, because this is relatively almost complete. I will be doing shows this year, and the first show I will be doing is coming up at the end of this month. At the end of February, going into the beginning of March, the Seattle Emerald City Comic Con, I will be attending. So if you're based in the Northwest, Washington, maybe even Oregon, so I'm from Oregon. I grew up in Beaverton. It's not too far, to go to Seattle, but if you're in the Northwest, maybe even in Canada, you have to come into the US. I will be at Emerald City Comic Con with Dong Ho Kim from Super Ronnie, and we'll be tabling together. We are planning to do a workshop, a one-day workshop in Seattle the day before the show. So if you're in the Northwest, if you're looking to do a workshop and you want to do some in-person, hands-on sketching, drawing sort of experiences, you can maybe attend. That will be at the beginning of March, end of February. After that, the next show for me in person here in the US will be the San Diego Comic Con. So that'll be July. From there, locally, the show after that one will be New York Comic Con in October. And then directly after that, we'll go to Lightbox. There are thoughts and intentions of trying to do some international stuff. So we'll see what I may sort of like be attached to. There's a multitude of things I would be able to do, but it's more just about establishing the connection and making sure that everything's confirmed, travel wise and whatnot. There's personal travels also as well, but in terms of conventions and shows, I would like to do some international, at least one or two, because I used to do like four of them a year. Um, there's a potential things like in Singapore, maybe even I'll attempt possibly like Portugal. Um, there's a school in Paris that I was like working with. That's a possibility. Next year, there's maybe some dealings with Australia. Um, so there's always rumblings of discussion and talk, but once I confirm a lot of them, I will post them up my social media. Instagram is where I post most of my work still. But in any case, as we wrap this up, Hair Hunter, drinking that robot mech, based on the character that I created from over 25 years ago. And here we just drew it live right on the spot. And if I grab the old portfolio book again, I like to go back and look at it. And I didn't have it open, so I just want to go back and see them again. There's that version. A little bit different. Still fun seeing this. Oh yeah, here was that. I completely forgot I'd drawn a mech version in this piece. But it wasn't that. But I do remember he had like a mech robot. Well, that's fun. Did I ever visit Florida? Yeah, I've been to SuperCon in Miami, which unfortunately I may not be able to attend again. I thought about MegaCon, but I liked the ones in Florida. It's just more about Superani, the brand, about where they want to go, what shows they want to invest into. We tried the SuperCon because we were just kind of curious about it, but the manager was kind of like, we'll do some other ones too. That's why we're trying the one in Seattle. Emerald City, I've never been to. So Seattle Comic Con is my first time. And I've only heard great things about it. So I'm very curious to see how that show will go. Usually I go there doing things like live drawing and selling originals and signing books and all that sort of stuff. So we'll look for other shows in the future. Lightbox is still one of the biggest ones right now in the West Coast in California. Obviously, San Diego is huge as well too, but Lightbox is much more accessible, I would say. I really enjoy New York Comic Con. I think it's one of the best artist alley sections in most Comic Con shows. So I would be very much be interested in still maintaining that one in particular as being a part of. But yeah. And of course, if anybody has any recommendations of other shows to check out, put them in the comments. Netherlands, yes, I have actually several years ago. Many years ago, actually, now at this point. But I've been all over Europe, and I would love to go back to some of the places. I did a lot of workshops and classes in Denmark. I've been to Switzerland, a lot of workshops in Paris. I did a thing in Copenhagen, so there were definitely things of attendance I used to do. There used to be a great workshop in Austria I used to go to that I would do annually. There was a place in Graz, Austria. Awesome place as well. And some people might think otherwise about some of these places, but I love them. Did a show festival in Croatia, in Split, beautiful place as well too. So back in the day, I used to do quite a bit of international workshops. What I will announce, and this is something that I may not necessarily activate just yet, but this is something I can kind of tell you guys alive, is that I am playing with the idea of doing things like a retreat, and a small artist retreat, starting first here in LA and in the California area, which is basically a more of a kind of a privatized one-on-one small group orientation where we spend a weekend staying in the same locations, visiting a lot of different places. So I would obviously curate the location. We would go to a hotel. We would all stay there, and not only just do a workshop by showing you how to draw and sketch at these places, but then spend the days, whether we have dinners or lunches or just evening drinks and sketch and draw and just talk. These sort of artist retreats. I've played with the idea of something like this for quite a while. So I'm thinking of doing something like that in LA first, because I have so many places in LA I can go to, different museums, different locations, and just for the general accessibility of it. So I'm thinking about it. Not really going to sure if I want to do it just yet, but do know that if you're in the local area or want to even travel out to stay for like a long weekend, it would be like a 3 or 4 day event sort of thing. And we'd just be hanging out the entire time. It'd be small groups, probably like maximum 10, 15 people. But if I do announce something like that, it'll be posted up on Instagram again. But in any case, look forward to stuff in the new year, 2026. hopefully do a lot more things, and I hope to maintain health and nothing crazy happens in the year. Knock on wood, if I had any material like that down over here. Last year was kind of a blur, and it felt like there was no last year because I'd spent 5, 6 months recovering. So I really wasn't doing anything except for just laying there. So pretty much all of last year was almost nothing for me. Um, anyways, that was fun. Fun to draw the character again. Thank you guys for joining in. I will see you all next time. I will aim for shooting for next Wednesday again around this same time period. I will post up on Instagram normally on a story about, hey, I'm popping on the live stream and jump on board. And we'll probably try to keep it to the same format. I think doing on the phone is quite nice. And I may even do it in my office once in a while, of course, as well, too. But thank you guys for hanging out, asking a lot of questions. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click like, subscribe, and I'll see you all next session. Appreciate it.